Okay, so you should all be seeing my screen now. Great, so good morning, everyone. This is Pat Santoso from Axiomatic. Thank you all for joining this morning. I will advise you, if you've taken the VTPI sales validation training before, this will be exactly the same. So we're gonna go probably about 55 minutes, almost word for word, same jokes, not any funnier this time than they were last time. So if you've already taken, this will be a little bit repetitive, but if not, welcome and thank you for joining. So for this first session, our training agenda is to begin with the municipal process overview. So we're going to review municipal information, talk about sales validation in the VTPI system, and review the support modules. So we have 3 modules we will review this morning. We'll also go over how to request your account and take any questions that you might have. And the format of this training will be, we'll start with walking through everything in a slideshow, and then I'm going to give you a live demo within our test application, which is just kind of fake data here. So nothing real will be changing, but just showing you exactly how the system works. So we're going to begin with the municipal information module and talking about what has changed. This is basically a digital online version of the paper form that you used to get from PVR, asking you who your listers are, who your town clerk, delinquent tax collector, et cetera, what your hours of operations are. So all of this is now within the system to be submitted annually to PVR. And optionally, you can track your staff training and certification. So you don't have to put that in the system, but we've commonly heard it's kind of difficult to keep track of who has taken what training and what CEUs they need to maintain their certifications, et cetera. So that is available. It's not required to be tracked in the system, but it is available for you. We also have a digital questionnaire. So this captures a lot of the questions that were on that paper sheet. And there's an upload so that you can upload digital documents to keep in our online repository. So a couple things to highlight. When you log in, you'll come to your municipal homepage, and I'm highlighting here on the top left, you have a jurisdiction dropdown and a year dropdown. So if you are someone that works in multiple towns, if you're a contract assessor, for example, we can give you access to multiple towns with your single login. And with the year, as we move forward in time, you'll be able to go back and look at your previous year's information within the application. So here we have our modules. For phase 1, we have municipal information, equalization study, and support. You'll also see in several places throughout the application resources. So these are just helpful links for you to go directly out and view things like the statewide GIS parcel viewer, the PVR newsletter, the PVR homepage, reappraisal rules, as you see. And as we go into sales verification, you'll see different links in there as well. So taking a look at the municipal information module, this is the first segment that we're going to cover. I just want to highlight, you'll see throughout the application, help text at the top of the page, as well as a blue eye information icon. So the help text is meant to give you some context about the page that you're on, and the blue eye information icon is actually a link out to help documents specifically about the page that you're on. So in municipal information, we have organization. So this is where you'll report on your personnel, so your assessors, your listers, et cetera. We have documentation. This is where you can upload documents to go into your municipal file. And we have questions. So this is where you'll answer, and as it turns out, 21 questions this year that PVR is posing. And it's the questions you're used to. It's things like, what are your clerk's hours? What are your lister's hours, et cetera. We also have our activity tracker, so you'll be able to see when you've submitted your municipal information to the state, when they reviewed it, et cetera. And finally, the submit button. So this is where you submit and send everything off to the state. So starting with the organization module, we're just asking for contact information for your assessor, your listers, your town clerk, tax collector, treasurer, and delinquent tax collector. So let's take a look at how that works. So going into the organization module, I want to highlight, you'll see this help throughout. So if you get to a page and you're not sure what you should be doing, you can use this help text to clue you in, and that the information icon, will give you a link to the help documentation. I also wanted to introduce you to a couple of key features in the application. So you'll see this sort of table throughout the application. This top section allows you to search and filter. So if you can imagine, you have 10 people listed in this table. If you type something into this top name box, it will filter down and search within the table so that you can get to the record that you're looking for. Another common feature you'll see is this actions drop-down with this downward arrow. So if I wanted to edit this top record of Patrick, I would click the actions drop-down to edit that top record. Another common feature you'll see is the add button, which is on the bottom left. So we're looking at organization. This is where we report our personnel, our assessors, our listers, etc. So to add them, we use the add button on the bottom left. So you're going to see this be very consistent throughout the application. So I'm just highlighting these key system elements so that you can be familiar with them. So adding personnel. So if we add a person, we have a pretty basic data entry screen. So you have first name, the last name, your department position, etc., and the contact information. So this is all that's required. For municipal information, it's really just a reporting of the folks that work in town and their contact info. So once we've added a person to our organization, we can edit their information by clicking the edit button here. And we have several optional.
I am connecting.
You are, you're there.
Yeah. I will.
Okay. And again, commonly here, now we're into our personnel section. We have activities, certification, training, and properties. These are all optional. But again, common to the system, you can edit things by using the actions dropdown, and you can add them by using the add button on the bottom right. So again, all optional here. You can track activities. So what this person is doing for the town, whether they're doing sales collection or measuring and listing or administration. We have certification so that you can track what certifications they may have, training, and the properties that they might own. Again, all of these are optional. We also have in our table the similar search function. So again, you'll see this throughout the application. So remember, only the contact info is required. We have optional tracking for activities that the personnel perform, training, certification, and properties that are owned. But really, we're just looking for the contact info. And to circle back on key features, we have the help that appears on top of all of the screens. So if you're having trouble, look to the top of the screen, use that information icon to link out to more detailed help documentation. We have our common table structure, which has all of our searches and filters. You have your actions menu, which allows you to edit things within the table. And you have your add button to add records. One additional feature I'd like to highlight is the breadcrumb navigation. So you'll see this throughout the application. As we see here, we are in the town of Addison. We're in the municipal information module and doing our organization adding. So clicking on municipal information here would bring us one level up. Clicking on Addison would bring us all the way up to Addison's homepage. So you'll see that throughout the application. So if you want to back out of the section that you're in, you can use the breadcrumbs on the top left to do so. The next section in municipal information is documentation. So this is where you can attach documents to become part of the municipal file. This year, we don't have any required documentation, so you can take a look at this, but you don't need to actually take any action. So number one, you'll see a bunch of document types that you can upload, and once you've uploaded them, you can click the download all to download everything as a zip if you want to retrieve that. Once again, the actions dropdown allows you to go in and edit this particular record. You can see whether or not this is a required upload. In this case, none of them are for this year. And you'll see this in the municipal information module in a few places, the review status. So whether or not the state has looked at it and if they've noted any recommendations for you. And you'll see this primarily this year in the question section. So as you're answering questions, your district advisor will be able to provide comments back if they have any feedback or recommendations based on the responses you've provided. So just looking at how you would upload documentation, it works just like an email attachment. You browse for a file, you click upload, and then it'll appear in the table below, and you can edit or delete it if you need to. Finally, clicking complete will complete that upload task. So the last piece of the municipal information module is the questions section. So again, this is largely a replacement for the paper questionnaire that you got from PVR. So a lot of the questions are the same. There are a couple new questions. There's only 21. It shouldn't be a huge time sink for you to answer them. The big thing here is in year one, you'll answer all of these questions. And next year, when you go back through this module, if the answers are the same, you can carry those answers forward. These will continue on in time. If the lister's hours haven't changed, it'll be one click to confirm that those are still your lister's hours. So taking a look at the questions module, you'll see a list of questions that PVR has posed to you. These are the first 4. As I said, there's only 21. It should be fairly quick. And they're all questions that you will know the answer to. So just like everywhere else in the application, we have the actions dropdown, which you'll use to answer the question. We have whether or not the question is required and whether or not you have answered it. So there are a few questions this year that are not required because they don't pertain to everybody. So what you're looking for in order to be able to submit is that all of your required questions have been answered. We also have, for transparency, whether or not PVR has reviewed these questions that you have submitted. So taking a look at answering questions, we'll go ahead and use our actions menu to get into the question. Question text is at the top left. Here's where we provide our answer, and you can copy and paste if you have these answers in other documents. And then next year, if you've already answered the question, you'll be able to use the prior year answer to populate if nothing has changed. Finally, we have our Save and Next button on the bottom left. So this will allow you to move through your questions. And your progress will be saved. So you don't have to answer everything at once. You don't have to provide all of your personnel at once. You can do it bit by bit, and it will save your progress until you are ready to submit to PVR. So looking at our checklist for municipal information, you have to enter at least 2 personnel in your organization. I know people wear many hats, a lot of listers, clerks, and so forth, but you have to have at least 2 people. If you don't have at least 2 people, please contact support. We can work around that, but that is the minimum requirement there. For documentation, these are all optional uploads because they don't apply to everybody. And the questions, you just have to answer all required PVR annual questions. Again, there are only 21. They're pretty basic questions you should be able to answer easily. Once you've answered all of them, just click Submit, and that will be sent off to PVR for review. Another common system feature I want to highlight is the Reports dropdown. You'll see this on the top right of a lot of areas within the application. And this is where you can report out information. So the reports are exportable to PDF and Excel. Probably the biggest one that you'll see that will be useful is exporting your sales out to Excel once we get to the sales validation section. But in this section, you'll be able to export the answers to all of your questions, all of your staff, all of their trainings. So this is a really helpful tool, especially for maybe reporting to your select board. Here are all of our people, their trainings, their certifications, and some basic information about our assessing practices in town. Also at the bottom right here, you'll see once PVR completes their review of your municipal information, you'll have the opportunity to provide comments back. So you might get some feedback from PVR based on the questions that you answered. So you can do your post-evaluation comments here and put any responses that you might have to become part of the record for that year. So I'm going to switch over right now. If you bear with me for one moment, I'll bring the application up. Just switch my screen share here for a minute. Okay, so all I've done is logged into the application. And again, now we're going into a live demo. This is our test server, so this is not real information that we're looking at. So I do want to highlight, if you're someone that has multiple towns that they work in, if you're a contract assessor, we can link those to all one account. We have our year drop down, so next year you'll be able to go and retrieve all of your information that you've worked with this year. So here we have our modules and then our resources. So these links out to useful information in other applications. I do want to highlight, this is a mobile responsive application. So if you are so inclined, I'll just switch my view here for a moment. I'm now looking at it on about the size of a tablet. So my left-hand menu switches over to this top menu and everything flows into this tablet format. If I go a little bit smaller, now perhaps I'm on a phone, we can still access all of our information and it just flows into a phone format. So I don't anticipate anybody validating sales on their telephone or answering municipal questions on their telephone, but if you do need access to the system and maybe more pertinent as we move forward into subsequent phases, you will be able to get into the application from your mobile device and access things if you need to. All right, so we're going to talk first about this municipal information module. So I'm going to go ahead and click into that. Oh, and I stayed logged in too long as I was talking through the presentation. So I'll log in once again. And the timeout is 30 minutes. So I was logged in a little bit too long there. So we'll go into municipal information. Again, to highlight, starting on the top left, I've got my breadcrumb trail here. So I am in Braintree and the municipal information module, and I'm actually going to use Brandon for this demo. So we have our breadcrumbs here. This is our easy navigation that we have throughout the application. We have our help text up here. So if you're on a page and wondering what you should be doing, this is the first place to look. And if I click on this eye, this blue eye icon, it will take me out to the help specifically about that page. So this is something you'll see consistently throughout the application. If you'd like to print this off, we have a print button right here, which you can use to print off this help documentation for the page that you're looking at. All right, so we have our three modules here: organization, documentation, and questions. And we're just going to run through them in order. So organization, we see up here what we're looking for: just basic contact info for your municipal staff. So we'll go ahead and add. I'm going to use my saved information so you don't have to struggle through me typing. So you can pick the position. You can see that there are multiple positions in there as well. If it's an appointed or elected position or a contractor, you can use that. If there's an expiration, you can put that in as well. But really, we're just looking for contact info and who the person is. All right, so we've added one of our people. Remember, you have to add at least two, and the positions we're looking for here are up at the top. So now going into edit, the one person we've added, we have our activities, our certifications, our training, and optionally properties that this person owns. And again, 100% optional. Just that first step is what we're looking for, just the contact information. The pieces that might be useful just for your own internal tracking are what training and certification these people have taken. And we can use our add button here again on the bottom right to add, let's say, a training. Maybe we took IAAO 101 from VALA. Took it yesterday, very recent. It was a great course, and we got 5 CEUs for it. So if you're entering a bunch of courses, if you want to use this to track all the courses you've taken, save and new will be a great feature to just go to a new training if you're recording many of them, or we just click save, and now we have our training here. So once again, remember, you're going to see this table all over the place. So this is how you can sort and filter here. We only have one record, but if you have multiple, this is how you can sort through it. You can log your certifications in a similar manner. So maybe we have a CAE from IAAO. Again, yesterday we've been very busy. Did very well. We can save that. So an easy way to track certifications when you've got them, trainings that you've taken, et cetera, and keep this all in one centralized location. And all this information rolls over every year. So this will be kind of an ongoing online municipal file that will be tracked and stored and shared with PVR. So again, you have to add at least 2 people. We're looking for the folks listed up there in the help, same people that were on the paper form. Documentation, again, there is no required documentation this year, but if you want to upload things to your municipal file, we use our actions menu to go in, and you browse just like an email attachment. So you find the file that you want to upload, click upload, and it'll attach it to this record. You can attach multiple files as well. I know some scanners will create a single image for each page of a document. So throughout the application, you'll see that you're able to upload multiple files to comprise one attachment because some scanners function that way. So we'll just click complete to complete that upload. Again, there's no documentation required for this year because these don't apply to everybody. But you'll have that available to you as well. And the final section of municipal information are the questions from PVR. So clicking on this, again, the same table that we're used to with our searching and our filtering available here up top, our help with our help information button to get out to specific help, and then our actions menu to go in and actually answer the question. So what are our town clerk's hours? All right. Maybe 8 to 4:30 Monday, Wednesday, Friday. We'll go save a new. What are your treasurer's hours? We can just paste in there the same. And maybe you want to stop here. We can just click cancel. And we've answered 2 of our questions here. So this will save our progress. And we can go right out, come back in later if you don't want to answer all of these questions at once. And it will save your progress. So you don't have to answer every single question. It will save until you are ready to submit. So you can just go through and answer all of the required questions. So checking to see if you're ready to submit. All the required questions say yes, that they have been answered. And again, there's 21. These are the first 4. They're all fairly basic, all from that paper sheet that you're used to. So that is the process of submitting your municipal information. And this is a great place to get used to how the software works. Everything in the application will work very much like this. So this is a very nice low stress way to just provide some information about folks that work in town and answer a few questions about your basic operations and get that submitted off to PVR. So I'm going to go ahead and switch back over to my PowerPoint here. And we'll continue through the training. So the next piece we're going to talk about is your equalization study. So this is where you're going to verify your sales, and this is going to tie in with the later segments of this training to talk about how to do your research on sales and how to select the appropriate special circumstances code. So this is work that you did last year in My VTax. The task you're doing really has not changed. It's just centralized into VTPI now. So your primary task is going to be verifying your sales information. So the sale price, the listed value, if there were special circumstances, which we're going to discuss, verify the category code, and verify if there was personal property, concessions, the acreage, and provide your lister comments. And those lister comments go straight to PVR when they're reviewing the sales on their side. So I did want to talk a bit about the PTTR, the Property Transfer Tax Return Import process. So the process for submitting the PTTR to PVR, it's a lot of P's, is going to remain unchanged. So same process going through the town clerk. They're going to provide a bit of information at the time of filing the deed. That's going to go off to the state. That is the point at which the process is changing. So we will import those PTTR forms from the state and bring them into VTPI. the first step of the import is actually linking those records to your grand list. So we have the grand list that you submitted to PVR as of August, so your final values for April 1st of last year. So when these PTTR records come in, these sales records, we link them to that grand list automatically, and we update the values that are on the PTTR to reflect what's on your grand list. So we update the listed value, we update the acreage and the category code, and these are all from your August submission. And I will say that the link rate, so linking them to the grand list, we're at less than 1% that we can't link now, and I'm going to talk about that as we go through the demonstration. I think we have about 15,000 sales that are valid for the equalization and ratio study, and about 150 we couldn't link to a grand list record, mostly due to either an incorrect span or no span provided on the PTTR. So as you're validating those sales, if you run into that, which is pretty unlikely given the numbers, you'll just have to pick the correct grand list record, and we'll show you that in the application, but that's a very low number of them. So those are all in the system ready for you. The first step of your process is the local verification. So this will be very similar to what you did in VTPI, in MyVTax. You'll just be doing it in VTPI now. Where the process gets different is after you finished your validation in MyVTax, PVR would actually download those sales into an access database. So essentially, they would become completely disconnected from you and the work you did in MyVTax, and they would continue their verification in their access database. So the big difference in VTPI is local and state verification takes place in the same system. So this is important for two reasons. You'll be able to submit your sales to the state. And I like to say this is like a football. You complete your process and pass the ball to the state. Once you've passed the ball to the state, it's no longer editable by you. The good thing is you're both in the same system. So if you've submitted it to the state and you need to provide more information, we can send it right back to you. We can send one sale back, we can send all the sales back. So don't hesitate if you feel like you're done, you have all the information about the sale, to submit that to the state so that they can get started on their review. But don't worry, you can always get that back. Literally one click to send one sale back or all of your sales. So again, one of the primary things, and this will be covered more in later sections of the training, are assigning special circumstances. So what you're really looking to do here is determine if this is an arm's length transaction. When we say arm's length, we mean a sale between two or more unrelated and unaffiliated parties that are acting independently and in their self-interest. We want the involved parties to have equal bargaining power and information to lead them to agree upon a fair market price. So basically what we're looking to do is gauge the market, and we want that to be an open market transaction without anything that would affect that market price impacting it. So this is going to be compared to your listed value, and this is a performance metric. So we want to make sure the sales we're using to compare are valid sales for the ratio study. And what you're looking for are things that would affect that sale price, that would make them non-arm's length transactions. They have special circumstances. So things like family sales, and these are the same codes you're all used to. The code listing is the same. So maybe it was a family sale, a sale from parents to a child. Depending on the family, that might be a higher or a lower sale price. Maybe it's a corporate transaction. Maybe a company is selling to a subsidiary. They're selling a piece of property to a subsidiary company. Could mean that that's not market price. Of course, if it was a foreclosure, a forced sale as a result of a divorce, an estate sale, maybe an unmarketed estate sale, or one of the common ones, a large change post-assessment. In other words, as of April 1st, there was just a home. That was the property that you assessed. That was the property that was reflected in your listed value. The property that sold in November was a house and a barn. They built a barn over the summer. So the sale price will be much more than what you assessed it for. It now has a barn. So you can use that special circumstances code. So this is one of your primary jobs. And again, it will be covered further in later sections of the training. But determining if that sale is an arm's length transaction and it's valid to be compared against your assessed value. Some of these special circumstances code will require comments from you. For example, if you say it was an abutter sale, we're going to ask you for the span of the abutting property. If it was a family sale, we're going to ask you what the relationship between the parties were. So you'll see as you try to use these codes, there will be prompts to provide additional information for some of them. Okay, so going into the sales home screen. So this will be where you'll begin your work in validating the sales. And I'm highlighting here on the top left, this dropdown, which is by default selected to unverified. So this is meant to be your work queue. These are sales that we have in the system that you have not verified yet. And I want to just spend a minute here. We see we have 5 sales that are unverified. This is going to be a common interface for other modules throughout the system. So if you look here, we have 5 sales that we need to verify. As we verify them, they're going to drop off this list of unverified sales. If you can imagine, in phase 2, we're going to be deploying current use. You'll log into the current use module, and you'll have a list of current use applications or unenrollments, et cetera, that you need to work through. So you'll have your work queue in the table, the same table you'll see throughout the application. And essentially, when this table is empty, when the unverified sales, current use, homestead are empty, you've completed your work. So this will be a very common style of interface that you'll use throughout the application. And highlighting, moving back specifically to sales verification, because the state and locals are in the same system, they're actually going to be able to ask you questions about the sales. And I'm not going to go into great detail on this because it's not going to happen for a little while. But there'll be a message board style interface, and I'll show it to you when we do the demo, where the state can ask you questions about a sale, and there'll actually be a back and forth, a question and answer tagged to that sale. And that will move forward next year for the 2 years of sales that carry forward. So you'll have that history tracking with the sale year over year. And this is where you'll be able to see if there are any questions associated with the sale. And just highlighting here on this last column, the span, you'll notice the last 2 don't have span. This is that really rare case, again, less than 1%, less than 200 sales throughout the state thus far, where the information provided on the PTTR wasn't enough for us to find the correct property. So you're going to have to do just a little bit of work, and I'll show you how to do it, to just find that grand list record for us so that we can actually tag that to the map. And we're going to talk about the GIS portion of this as well. So the statewide parcel map, we have that all tied in a GIS application, which is live. So we'll talk about that as well. Once again, highlighting, we have the reports drop down here. This is probably the report that you're going to want to use the most. You can actually export all of your sales out to Excel, so you can manipulate them there as well. And I do want to highlight, when you submit your sales to PVR, they're going to go away in this table. You always have access to all of your sales in your reports, though. Those never go away. You can always see everything in the report. And once again, if you submitted things to PVR and you need them back, you can just ask for them back, and they can send them back to you with just one click. All right, let's take a look at an individual sale, the actual sales verification process. So here we are on the overview screen, and I'll talk you through all this information. I know it looks like a little bit of, quite a lot of information perhaps, but we can walk through it. So on top, we have our tabs. We're on the overview tab. So this is giving us an overview of the sale that we're working with. We also have the properties tab. So this is where we can see the grand list records that are linked to the property, and it can be multiple if it was a multi-parcel sale. We have our attachments tab. This is where you can actually attach documents to this sale. So from our example of the home that had a barn added, maybe you want to just attach the building permit for that barn so that when PVR is reviewing it, they can see like, ah, yes, but definitely a barn was added. This is not a valid sale. You might also list the MLS or a questionnaire if you've gotten the questionnaire back from the buyer or the seller. And this is where also PVR will be attaching the questionnaires that they get back. And lastly, questions. So once again, a message board where PVR can ask you clarifying questions about each sale, and you can respond within the application. So taking a bit of a closer look at this overview tab about our sales information. On the top left here, this box, we have information from the PTTR. So the first thing you'll see is a reference number. This is just a sequential ID. There's no intelligence behind it. It's just a number that's shorter than the book and page. So if you're talking to axiomatic support or you're talking to your district advisor, you can say, I'm looking at sale 2, not, book 103, page 2304. So just a shorthand for communicating. It doesn't mean anything. We have our document number, that's our book and page, our sale date, buyer and seller, and the buyer and seller mailing address. So good information to see if these people are related. In the box below, we have our grand list information. So this is not from the PTTR. This is from the grand list that you submitted to PVR. So we have our span, and you see the view map icon. We do have a separate training now on GIS. There's actually one coming up this afternoon. We do have a full statewide GIS that has every parcel and every grand list record in the state available for you to search and report. It also has all of the sales for 5 years. So there's a lot of good information in the GIS. I'll show you how that links, and there are separate trainings available for that. But pulling from the grand list, we have the situs address and the mailing address, as well as the owner and the legal description of that property. So you can see your grand list information that is independent from the sale. We also have our verification section. So this is the information that we're asking you to verify. And I'm looking at the first column here. We see 2. So we maintain 3 versions of truth. So this first column is what was submitted on the PTTR. So we have the real property sale price, the listed value, the special circumstances, the category code, and then the total sale price, personal property value, concession, and the acreage. So this is all the information that was submitted on the PTTR. Our next column is your lister edit column. So this is where you can override what was submitted on the PTTR if it's not correct. The blank column on the right-hand side is actually where the state's column will be. And by default, everybody agrees. So to start with, the lister values and the state values are assumed to be what was submitted on the property transfer tax return. The lister can override those values if they're not correct. Then the state by default agrees with the lister. And finally, the last step is the state can override those values if they need to. But the default is everybody agrees. We also have our verify button here. So this is where you'll actually click to verify the sale. You'll notice we also have a little blue arrow. That's how you go to the next sale. I'm on the first sale here. If I wasn't, there'd be a back blue arrow as well to go to the previous sale. But clicking on verify will bring up our edit window. And this is where you can edit all of those values that we were looking at. And again, if you don't need to change them, you can just click verify. You'll notice the real property sale price is grayed out. That's because it's calculated. So you can edit that by changing the total sale price, the personal property, and the concession. So that real property sale price is calculated as the total sale price minus personal property minus concessions. So you can edit the values there that you need to. And on our bottom section, you can choose your special circumstances code. Once again, remember, if that's not an arm's length transaction, if there was something going on with the sale that affected the sale price, you can choose an appropriate special circumstances code. And you can see there we chose a butter sale, and it's prompting us to provide the span of the abutting property. You can also override the category code. Shouldn't need to do that very much, but remember that is chosen from your grand list record. And provide your lister comments. When you're done, click verify. It'll bring you right back to the screen, and now you'll have a submit button. So if you're confident that you're 100% done with this sale and you want to send it off to PVR, you can just go ahead and click that submit button. That will send it to PVR, and you won't be able to edit it anymore. Once again, you can always get those sales back. But if you don't want to submit it, just click the next right-hand arrow there, and you can move on to your next sale. So getting into the corner case. So for those less than 1% of sales where we can't find the appropriate grand list record, and again, usually it's because there's no span provided or the span has a typo in it. You just need to find that correct property. So you'll see here when you come upon a sale like that, you won't have the verify button. Instead, you'll have this link that will prompt you to please attach the appropriate property to this sale. So clicking on that link is actually going to take you to the properties tab, where you just search for the correct property. And I'll show you this when we do our demo. You can search by the owner name, by the span, click search, select the correct property from the list, and click the add button. And usually with all of these searches, less is more, and you guys know your data better than I do. But if it's Meadowbrook Road, it might be Meadowbrook Road spelled out, Meadowbrook RD, Meadowbrook RD period. So usually less is more. I generally would start with the street name or last name of the owner. Span obviously is pretty exact, but usually less is more with any of those type of searches. So now we're looking at here, coming back to our sales home screen. And again, we'll show you all this in the application. And switching our selector here over to verified, we can now see the sales that we've verified. Now, once we release these to the state, by clicking the release button, these will all go away. So clicking release here will send all of the sales that you've verified off to the state. Once again, you can get them back if you need to, all of them or individually, because you're all working in the same system now. All right, so let's go over to a demonstration here. We've just got a little bit longer before we get to our next segment. So bear with me for one moment here as I just switch over to demo the application. Okay, so once again, I'm at my home screen here. We can see that we have 240 records to verify. So I'm going in here to our equalization study and just showing you the workflow tracker here. So throughout the application, we like to make transparency a priority so that you can see what you've done and what the state's done, because you're both working together towards the same goal. So we can see that we have 0 of our 240 sales locally verified. None of them have been released to the state, and the state hasn't reviewed anything because nobody's submitted anything to them. And we also have our useful links and information here. So a couple different ones here, your ratio study guide from IAAO, EQs. So you'll see this in several places throughout the application to get to links that are useful for the particular section that you're on. So we're going to go into sales validation. Now, once again, we have our help here. So keep an eye on the integrated help. We go into sales validation. And once again, I'm looking at my unverified sales. So again, if you can imagine, this is current use, this is homestead. These will be the records that you need to review, will be shown on your homepage. If we look at the records we have verified, nothing. We haven't done any work yet. It's only February, we shouldn't have. So we're in good shape here to start reviewing our sales. If we go through, our first 3 have spans. Our 4th sale, no span. Once again, our reference number here, totally unintelligible, just sequential ID. So don't take any meaning to this. It's just a number to use if you're communicating with your DA or with axiomatic support to say, I'm looking at sale 1 instead of 253-43. So purely a shorthand. So let's go in and verify, and I'll highlight here since we're here. Here are our reports. So if you want to export your sales out, that's available to you. Let's go in and verify a sale. So once again, we have our PTTR information. We've got our buyer and our seller, their mailing addresses, and the property address. So all as submitted on the PTTR. Then we have our grand list information. This all appears to track, right? 13 Prescott, this is from our grand list. The PTTR said 13 Prescott. Current mailing address, Deer Run, tracks with the seller's Deer Run. So this is making sense. Our acreage also tracks with what was submitted on the PTTR. So this is looking pretty good. Then we have our verification section. Information submitted on the PTTR. So the real property sale price, the listed value, special circumstances, again, as submitted by the PTTR. So in this case, there were none as reported on the form. The total sale price, personal property, none, no concessions, and the reported acreage. So everything looks pretty good here. I can click on the map icon here. And again, I want to highlight, we have a separate training and a separate request form for credentials for the GIS mapping application. It has every grand list record and every parcel in the state on it. And this relies on your submission to VCGI. So when you submit your parcels to VCGI, we're actually linked directly to it. I'm going to go ahead and log in. And it's going to load the map and zoom us straight to that parcel. Legal disclaimer. So here we are, right on that parcel that transferred. So we've got great information here. There are multiple buildings. We have some of our grand list information as well. And once again, there's a separate training on GIS. It is a separate credentialed system as well. So you'll have a separate username and password. As you saw, you can save it, and it actually keeps you logged in for about 6 hours. So if you're verifying sales and you want to zoom to the map and get more information, you can do that. Just save your credentials. You'll log right in. So you can get great background information about that property, exactly where it is, what properties are around it. And you'll see this in all of our interfaces. So when you're looking at current use, it's going to be exactly the same thing. Because we're linking everything back to your grand list, we'll be able to tie back to the map for all of these types of scenarios. So we'll click verify here. So let's go through the quick scenario. All looks good. I have no reason to believe that this was not an arm's length transaction. Sale price is pretty close to the listed value. Verify, you're done. One click. If you want to submit it to the state, click submit. If you don't, just go to the next sale. So again, very quickly, I don't have any reason to believe that there are special circumstances. Let's pretend there was. Maybe it was a family sale. Oh, they're just done. Verify, done. So again, if you want to click submit, you can click submit. You can also see here, there was nothing on the PTTR to indicate there were special circumstances, but I, as a lister, am putting in that it's a family sale. By default, the state agrees. You say it's a family sale, the state agrees it's a family sale. So if we go next, let's verify this one. No special circumstances, perhaps. We'll verify it. Go to the next one. Uh-oh. This sale does not have a property. So we have no verify button because we haven't associated it with the grand list record. So now we just have to find the correct property. And we have some good information over here to do so. Clicking property here brings you to the properties tab. We can add a property. I'm just going to look for Smiths because I always look for Smiths. It's obviously not the right property, but your job will be to find the correct property that's sold. And if you can't, if the record doesn't exist for whatever reason, you can definitely contact support and we can work around that. So we'll click this property, click the add button. Now we've added that property to the sale. And it's highlighting here because it's the value that I said from the grand list is different from the value that was reported on the PTTR. So maybe not the right sale, certainly not the right record. The address doesn't remotely match the property address. But you would choose the correct record, verify. Again, you can override any of these values, select a special circumstance if you need to, change the category code, or put in your lister comments. So if you have comments typed up for your sale in another system, you can copy and paste them right here. I know we had some people that were saying the amount of characters allowed in my VTAX was not sufficient. This is an enormous field, so you can write as much information as you need to. And this goes straight to PVR so that they see it when they're working with their sale. So we'll click verify. Once again, clicking submit sends that off to the state. And you just keep working through your sales in that fashion. It's saving our progress all the way through. I can use my breadcrumbs to come back. And now my list is just a tiny bit shorter here. You can see I'm up to sale number 5. If I switch over to verified, here are the sales that I've verified and I've not sent to the state yet. So clicking release here will send these all to the state and they'll go away. So if I click release, those will go to the state. I don't have any verified sales anymore because I sent them all to the state already. All I have are my work queue here of my unverified sales. And I do want to highlight there's a little bit of a different process for towns that are going through a reappraisal. We will be able to automatically update all of your listed values with your reappraised values. I know we've talked about that before. But we'll do a separate training on reappraisal since it only applies to a small handful of towns. So I don't want to confuse this training with that issue that doesn't apply to most people. So that's your sales verification process. I'm going to switch back over to my PowerPoint. I've only got a little bit more here before we wrap up. So the last section we're going to talk about is support. This is 100% optional. This is where you can pose questions to your district advisors. And I'm going to highlight this a couple times in these last few slides. But this system is not meant to replace interacting with your advisors. This is just meant to support and facilitate the work that you have to do with the state to administer the property tax. So still, by all means, email your advisors, call your advisors, meet with them. This is not meant to be the end all be all of your interactions with the state. It's just meant to support your interactions with the state. So we do have the support module, though, where you can ask questions of your district advisors. And these are process-related questions. So if you have a question on what to do with a contiguous parcel, how to value it appropriately, maybe there's a convenience store in a residential property and you want to know how you should value that combined parcel that was contiguous. That's a question for your district advisor, and you can ask that question through the support module, and it's a message board type interface. Technical support is different. That's if you know what you want to do, but you can't figure out how to do it in the system. That's our axiomatic tech support, and I'll show you that at the end of the system. But this support module is really just a message board, and the problem that we were looking to address was as town staff and even state staff turn over, a lot of good information and advice that was provided gets lost in individual emails and voicemails and just working knowledge. So this is a central repository. It doesn't change with staff, where anybody can go and look at what questions were asked and answered. So if we go into the support module, once again, the breadcrumb trail, we have one support item here. So using our actions menu, we can go into it. We can also use at the bottom right, create a new topic. So the common style of interface that we have throughout the application. So taking a look at an active support ticket, this is just a message board. So you start out with a subject and a question, and then you can reply. The state can reply, the town can reply back. A pretty straightforward interface. And I do want to show that just for a minute, because it's the same interface that you're going to see in questions. So let me just switch back over to the application. I'll use my breadcrumb trail to back out here, and we'll just take a look at support very quickly. So I don't have any support items open. We'll create a new topic. Contiguous parcels. To merge or not merge, that's the question. Now we have our support topic. So this goes right off to your district advisor. They can go in and view it and reply. So you'll have this message board style interface. This is exactly the same as questions on sales. This is going to be exactly the same for lister comments on current use and for homestead. So the idea here is once you get used to one or two of the modules, the rest of them should just kind of follow suit. So that's our support module. Pretty straightforward. Once again, that's for asking questions of your district advisors. So just as I'm wrapping up here, just a couple more slides. Recommendations for success, I'd probably start with the municipal information module. You don't have to, but it's pretty easy, right? Just reporting on the people that work in town and answering some questions, get that submitted off to PVR. That'll get you used to the system and then move on to sales validation. Of course, you can go in whatever order you want. They're both available to you. But just keep in mind the key program features, the breadcrumb navigation on the top left. So that will be always consistent on every single page. You can always go back. In this case, up to municipal information or up all the way to Andover's homepage. Remember the integrated help on top. So there's going to be text and also that blue eye, the information icon, so that you can get to help specifically about that page. And if you're looking at a table, you'll see that actions drop down so that you can edit things, the records within the table. So next steps. You received an email from Nella. I think you've received a couple of them now. But definitely one on 120 with a link to register for your user account if you have not already. If you use that second bullet, request.vtpi.org, that is the request form. So it's going to ask you for your name, your email address, and the town that you're requesting access for. We do have a list of all of the town folk from PVR, and we just use that to do a quick validation to make sure that we agree that you're associated with the town. So there's a little bit of a lag there as we do that verification. Once we verify that, you'll get an email from support@axiomnh.com, and that'll have an account activation link. So you'll click on the link. It also has instructions in there as well with help documentation. But when you click on the link, it'll prompt you to set a password. I do apologize. We have all of the annoying password rules, 8 characters, uppercase, lowercase, special character, all of that for security. So Sorry, but we do. And then you'll answer your 3 security questions so that you can retrieve your password if it's lost, and you'll be all set to log into the application. So again, if you haven't gotten an account, just jot down request.vtpi.org. That's where you request your account. And how do you get help? Well, we've seen the help documentation that's integrated throughout the application. So that the information icon you can use to get help. There's also the main help on the left-hand primary menu. This 1-hour training session that I'm providing has been recorded. This training session we're in is also recorded. So this is always available to you if you want to revisit. And then we have 2 sources of help. So one is axiomatic technical support. You can see the information on the top right, support.axiomnh.com is the support page. You can email for help at support@axiomnh.com or call for support using the telephone number provided. For process help, you still have your district advisor. So once again, this is, I don't know what I should do. I think the sale might not be valid, but I need help validating it. I don't know what I should be researching. That's still your DA. They're still a resource when you need help in that manner. But if you need help in the system, you know what you want to do, but you can't figure it out, by all means, contact Axiomatic support. And I do tell people, don't wait. We are here to help. If you can't figure out, I'd much rather hear from you after 90 seconds of trying to figure out what to do rather than half an hour and you're really frustrated. So we're definitely here to help you out. Don't hesitate to call, email. We'll get right back to you and get you back on track. I also provided my personal email on the bottom left. If you have feedback about this training, I'd love to hear it. If there are things that you find confusing that we could maybe do a better job explaining or expound upon, please don't hesitate to email me and let me know if there are things that we could improve. So that is all I have. I'm going to leave this screen share up, and I haven't been monitoring the chat, so I don't know if there's any questions. It doesn't show up very well in.
I have, Pat, so I'm going to kind of throw them at you one by one, okay? This is Jen.
Okay, sure.
So someone says they click the blue icon help button and it brings them to pages of information that's unreadable. The print is too small and even the printed page can't be read. Can you help?
Yeah, I would email the support. It's probably a Zoom on your browser. So probably Control- or Control+ will zoom you in or out depending on what you need.
Okay, and then someone else is saying that they're being kicked out of VTPI every time you get to the home page. Are others having this problem?
I haven't heard of that, but definitely email support. We can get that resolved for you.
Okay, and then this question was back when you were entering the municipal officials information. And someone was inquiring about the property's owned portion that could attach to the person. Was looking for more information.
Oh, sure. I can switch back over to that. Just give me 1 second here. Let me just close down this presentation. Yeah, so that again is optional. Let me just switch over here and we can take a quick look at that. Okay, and yeah, I see a bunch of chats here, so I can take a look at that as well. So this is really just a manner if we go into organization and we go into this one person that I've added. If you care to track the properties owned by this person, and I'm just going to go Smith, you can link them just to see the properties that are owned by folks that are involved in assessing. So not required at all, but if you care to track the properties that were owned by folks that are active in assessing in town, you can track that along with their trainings and certifications.
Okay. Someone just made a suggestion about the layout for grantor and grantee, which I think you said you can see that now.
Yeah, I can see the chat now.
Okay. I would say for Deborah Kingsbury, we will answer that question in the upcoming trainings after this. So where can you edit the span is the next question.
Sure. So good question. So by default, we will link to the span that is listed on the PTTR. If that's not the correct property, you can actually go into that properties tab and remove that and add a different grand list property, and I can show that as well, but maybe I can answer a couple more of these questions first. From Karen, is it possible to add the code numbers? Yep, that's going in very shortly, Karen. So for the special circumstances code, right in the demo I just showed you, we don't have the numbers showing. We will have the number of the code shown as well, and yep, Terry answered that. Spans are often wrong, especially when it's a subdivision. Sure, and that will depend on when the subdivision was, but we can also link to the parent parcel if that's the parcel that's available. How do you edit the span and the site address? I'll show you that in just a minute. So the seller owned 2 properties and the wrong property's listed value was selected on the PTTR. How do you edit? Okay. So this is a good one. The seller owned 2 properties and they put the span of the incorrect property and the listed value of the incorrect property. So property number 2 when it was property number 1 that sold, how do you correct that? That would just be switching the property link, and that goes on with changing the span. So I'll show that. Those are kind of the same thing. So a major part of this process is linking the property to the correct span, and I'll show you how to do that. So I pending demo item, show you how to switch the properties, which will take care of span and it being the wrong property. What are the expected turnaround times between PTTR and the VGIS map update? So we're linked directly to VCGI, and I think they work very quickly. So the map updates, I think you submit to them annually. As soon as they've got that process, that will be live in the VTPI. 1 out of 5 PTTRs get my red pencil, spans and especially the acreage. Yeah, so if it's the wrong span, you can link the correct span. And also remember, this is coming through the town clerk as well. So we have that's part of the information that we're pulling in on the PTTR is the town clerk's verified span. We put our lister information, do we put our personal info or our office info, i.e. our mailing address? And that's maybe a better question for PVR, which contact info you prefer. I would imagine your office contact info.
Yes.
Okay, so your office contact info. So wherever you receive your mail as an assessor or lister or town clerk. Bob asks, in Heartland, it shows 61 unverified rows, but the workflow tracker says 102. Yep, good. That's a bug, Bob, and what he's referring to, and I'll show you that too. So I have 2 pending demo items. That's for the sales that were pre-excluded. So there's a process at the state that goes through and bounces out trusts and things that are very obviously not arm's length transactions. That will be corrected very shortly. So we'll come back to the chat here. I want to make sure we get to everything, but let me just show you a couple of the things. So the bug that Bob brought up is this number and this number not matching the number of sales in this table. And in this case, it does. I've released 4. So that's just the pre-excluded sales. We're going to get that corrected. Those are sales you don't have to worry about. But yeah, great question. So to address the editing the span and the incorrect property being selected. So in this case, everything looks good. The property address submitted is the property address. The acreage from my grand list is lining up with the acreage from my PTTR. But let's say it wasn't. Let's say the span that was submitted on the grand list, or maybe just the wrong record was linked. Again, one of the questions was, what if the person owned 2 properties and they said property 1 sold, but it was really property 2? They just made a clerical error when submitting their forms, or probably their attorneys did. We would just go in. Here's the property that's linked, and this is a great question. Just remove it, and this is the same for adding a new span. So search for using the address, the owner name, the span. Just pick the correct property and click add. So we've done a couple of things here. We've changed the grand list information here, and it looks like I picked a condo or something because we have no acreage. We've changed the property that's associated with it, and it's by default has updated our listed value with the listed value from the property that we've selected. So that's the override. If you get the wrong span, just hop into properties, remove the property, and add the correct property. And you can add multiples too. If it's a multi-parcel sale, it'll just add up. The place where things go a little bit sideways, if it's multi-parcel sale and they have different category codes, the system doesn't know what to do. So you'll have to pick a category code. Another question we've had was the special circumstances code. You will have the numbers in here. That's coming very, very shortly. So you'll see whatever timeshare I think is 04. I think this is 5 maybe. So those numbers will be there. And again, this is where you can override the values if you need to. And I think we had a question about personal property and concessions. That'll be covered in subsequent session, but this is where you can report them, and I think they'll cover that further in the following pieces. Chris Evans, do we have the ability for reports we need in Excel? Sure. So getting those sales out, let me show you that quickly. Sorry for bouncing back and forth. It's hard to see the chat when you're presenting. So we can report our sales right out to Excel here. I'm using Google Chrome, so it's going to eventually show up in my bottom left here. So you can export those reports, those sales out to Excel, and you'll always have that. So once you submit sales, they'll disappear from this table and they'll be in the state's hands. But you can always export them out from Excel. And this is the first report I run for the day on my test server, so it's going to take a moment. But yeah, you can always export out to Excel. Jen, I don't know if there are other questions here as we wait for this to pop up.
Let's see. To have the ability for the reports, do we need Excel? Did you just answer that? I'm sorry.
It does. It exports as an Excel file, and it just popped up here. You can use OpenOffice to view them, and it always pops up in my other window. And it went right back there. So we have all of our sales information here. So you can use Excel, you can use OpenOffice is able to open this. Google spreadsheets, both of which are free, can also open this.
And that's the last one I'm seeing.
Cool. I appreciate everybody taking the time. I know we went a little bit longer here than I think I was allotted, but great questions, great clarification. So I appreciate your attention and questions this morning.
Thank you very much, Pat. So we're going to take a little break. I'm going to steal the screen away from, oh, he stopped sharing. And to get us started, we'll come back at 10 for that. Take a 5-minute break. And you may want to look in your email. You receive documents for an overview of equalization study documentation named 1 EEGGL 2022 V3. There's one where it says 1 per page and 2 per page. 1 per page is the slide is on printing on 1 page, and the other one is the slide is print 2 slides per 1 page. And we'll get, if you want to print that or open that, that's what we'll be talking about next. So we'll be back at about 10:23, try to catch up. And Pat, you're welcome to stay with us.
Awesome, thank you.
We're back. Next we have, here we go. Let me move it over. Get it ready. So next we have Christy Wright and Deanna Robitaille. They will be, this will be an overview of understanding what the equalization study is. This session will be a good tool to share with new listers and other boards if you want them to understand the equalization process. And Christy and Deanna, are you ready?
I'm ready. Good morning, folks. So what we're going to take you through is just some basics about what equalization is and what the impacts are. I think it's a great video that we'll be able to share. So you could share it with your select board or start your new listers out this way, or anybody else who might want to know. Kind of a good overview. And then in the other sessions, we'll get into more specifics about the math and so forth. So what is equalization? Many people believe that equalization and sales ratio are synonymous. Every state performs their equalization differently, and Vermont is not an exception. In Vermont, we perform a sales ratio study each year as part of the equalization study to determine how close properties in each town are being assessed compared to their current fair market value. This process is similar to other states, although there are some differences in the mechanics from state to state.
For example, in the simplest terms, if property X sells for $200,000, you would expect the town assessment to be close to that value. However, because of changes in the market and the fact that their last town reappraisal was 8 years ago, the assessment might be $150,000. This property is assessed at 75% of fair market value, and that number is achieved by dividing $150,000 or the listed value by the $200,000 for the sale price.
In order to determine what level of appraisal a town is at relative to 100%, we compare all valid arm's length sales to the assessment value in the town. Town assessments or listed value at time of sale are compared to the sale price for all valid sales within a 3-year period.
So, what is a valid arm's length sale? As part of this process, the towns have the opportunity and the responsibility to review all the sales and provide information to us about whether each sale should be included in the study as a valid arm's length transaction.
An arm's length transaction is any deal, contract, or agreement between parties who have no significant relationship with each other, be it familial, friendly, or business related. In this sort of transaction, no party has influence or control over another. They are independent entities, each acting in their own self-interest.
So let's add to that arm's length sale and fair market value. In order to understand whether or not a sale is a valid sale, you also need to understand what fair market value is. Title 32, 3481 suggests that the estimated, or defines, the estimated fair market value is a property is the price that the property will bring in the market when offered for sale and purchased by another, taking into consideration all the elements of the availability of the property, its use both potential and prospective, any functional deficiencies, and all other elements such as age and condition that combine to give property a market value. In determining estimated fair market value, the sale price of the property in question is one element to consider, but it is not solely determinative.
What would make a sale not arm's length or not fair market value? There are many reasons a sale may not be considered valid for PVR, property valuation purposes in the study, and here are some examples. A sale from a family member, such as a parent to a child, a sale from an estate, a sale from a bank after foreclosure or to a bank in lieu of foreclosure, a sale from a corporation to a member of the same corporation, a sale from a government agency or to a government agency.
All right, a few more reasons that a sale may not be considered valid would be where a sale was for only a portion of the property sold, a sale where only a portion of the rights to the property were sold, tax sale, sale from a non-taxable entity, and owner financing.
Because we are comparing the town assessment to the sale, we also want the property that sold to be the same as what was listed by the town, apples to apples, so to speak. Because of this, we may also exclude some sales if they are not apples to apples that might be valid sales for other purposes. For example, subdivisions, only part of the property that was listed by the town sold. For example, 10 acres sold from an assessment of 50 acres. Another example is major improvements to the property. For example, the property sold with a garage that was not listed by the town yet. And another example might be in a butter sale. The property that sold was sold to a buyer who owned the contiguous property.
Don't see any questions at this time.
All right. So our goal is to use the best and most accurate representation of sales in the town to calculate an overall sales ratio. So if you can imagine all the valid sales in a town being used by comparing the listed value to sale price for each, that is the bulk of your sales ratio study.
A sales ratio study is one part of equalization. A sales ratio study compares listed values to sales price for an overall percentage or ratio that represents the level a town is assessing at relative to 100%. Statistical measures are used to make sure the results are reasonable and consistent. And what you're looking at here will probably look familiar to you, hopefully. This is what we call the certified sales report, which will contain all of the sales that were determined to be valid for the 3 years and that were used in calculating all of the numbers that went into your equalization and sales study. And you can see that we show them by category, and then we list the buyer and seller of the sale. We also have the sales date, sales price, listed value, and then the ratio for each sale.
All right, still not seeing any questions, so we'll continue. Equalization is then applying those ratios to the town values to convert them to 100% of fair market value. In Vermont, we equalize all towns to 100%. Why do we equalize? So the first reason that we equalize is fairness. We want all towns to be equalized to 100% so that education tax rates and liability amounts are based on all towns being equal. And then we equalize to achieve a CLA and COD, or your common level of appraisal, or your coefficient of dispersion.
What are the CLA and COD used for? The CLA, or common level of appraisal, is used to express the overall level or ratio the town is at relative to 100%. This is different from the town ratio that you would get just by comparing listed values to sales. The difference is that we at PVR also apply a ratio adjustment for utility property, cable property, and current use property. CLA and COD are used to determine when the town will be mandated to complete a reappraisal. If the CLA is over 115 or under 85, the town will be required to reappraise. If the COD is over 20, the town will be required to reappraise.
Because assessments are not updated each year and it is unrealistic to reappraise all properties annually, the CLA is used to adjust the base education tax rates for each town to bring the tax rate to 100%. The CLA is also used to adjust use values in the current use program to 100%.
A CLA over 100% means that in general, the town is assessing properties at more than 100% of fair market value. A CLA under 100% means that in general, the town is assessing properties at less than 100% of fair market value.
All right, so how is current use handled for equalization? PVR also performs an adjustment for current use each year as part of the equalization study in order to help calculate the hold harmless amount that is paid to the towns for money lost from current use enrollment. This hold harmless amount is for the loss on the municipal tax rate only. The loss in education tax is borne by all taxpayers in the entire state equally. Another item that is affected by equalization but is not obvious is the county tax. The county tax paid by each municipality is also calculated based on the equalized values produced by this study.
So how do we equalize? Simply put, if your property sold for $200,000 but was assessed by the town at $150,000, we would equalize that $150,000 to 100% for town liability and CLA calculation. Assuming there were only 5 valid sales in the town over 3 years, which, believe it or not, sometimes happens, it would look like this. And here you'll see the listed values of those 5 sales arrayed, the sales prices of those 5 sales arrayed, and then the individual ratio for each calculated, which is listed value divided by sales price. And then we use what's known as the aggregate ratio, which is the total listed value divided by the total sales price. And just a caveat here that there are other statistical measures, obviously, that we use and adjustments for utilities and current use. These aren't seen here because this is simply a simplified version for demonstration purposes.
All right, so as we saw in that last grid, the total listed value was $775,400, and the total sale price was $955,000 even. That gave us an overall aggregate ratio of 81.19%. If you assume that the town's grand list was $5 million, you would divide it by the aggregate ratio, and you would your result would be $6,158,393. That number represents your equalized grand list at 100%.
So what is the COD? The short answer is the COD, or coefficient of dispersion, is the measure of fairness. In other words, some properties in a town are above 100% and some properties are below 100%. The COD measures the spread from the high and low ratio around the middle. In short, are the assessment levels fair or close enough to similar so that people are not being taxed inequitably? And if you picture it like a bell curve, as is shown below, you would see where the median ratio is, and then how far apart the ratios are would determine how large your COD is. So in other words, how big that curve ends up being, how far apart those ratios are.
All right, now we have the long, fun, technical definition of coefficient of dispersion. A measure of uniformity of appraisals for all property on the grand list. For example, if a town has valued every property at 100% to fair market value, every property has an assessment to fair market value of 100%. There is zero dispersion. Similarly, if every property is assessed at 80% to fair market value, there is also zero dispersion. However, if the town average assessment to sales ratio is 80%, but individual assessments vary markedly either above or below the average, then the disparity of assessment will reflect a COD of greater than 0%. 0 is a perfect COD score and indicates absolute fairness insofar as every taxpayer is appraised at the same percentage of fair market value. The higher the number, the greater the dispersion or disparity in how properties are assessed. Because of market fluctuations, a COD less than 10 is unusual. Statistically, it is the average absolute deviation of a group of numbers from the median expressed as a percentage of the median. Vermont municipalities must reappraise the properties in their town when the COD rises above 20%, as seen in 32 VSA 4041A, Section B.
So what you're looking at here now probably also will look familiar to you, hopefully. This is what's called the Certified Final Computation Sheet. And this is basically the summary sheet that gives you all the numbers and math calculations for your CLA and COD and your Equalized Education Grand List. So the first section will look very similar to you because you will see the 15 categories that are in your Grand List. And you will see the property count that relates to each of those categories in your Grand List. And then you will see the Education Form 411 listed values. And when we do equalization, these are your numbers that you last submitted to us, be it August, or you may have submitted a revised in September or October. The last one you submitted to us would be what we would use for equalization. So the numbers should look familiar to you. And then you'll see further on the applied ratio for each of those categories. And then using the applied ratio by dividing, we come up with the education equalized value. And in the fourth session today, the last session, we're actually going to take you through the math of each of those pieces. And then probably most importantly here in the page is where you find your CLA down towards the bottom in the middle. In this case, it's 80.76. And again, we'll take you through the math of how you get there. And then the townwide COD to the right at the bottom.
All right, so we have a little bit of a quiz. We did have one comment in the chat. Jen, did you want to read that for us?
Sure. I didn't know if you wanted to wait till after or not. So, Karen wants to know, why was the CLA changed from an 80% minimum to an 85% minimum, and what was the reasoning behind this?
I am not part of the legislature, so I don't know what their absolute reasoning is or was, but I think in part of the discussion, it was to make it equivalent above and below. So at that time, we had no upper limit. There was nothing above 100%. So making it 115 and then the bottom limit 85 made them equal around 100%. So I think that was the logic.
All right. So our little quiz, our first question is, does a CLA over 115 mean you'll be required to reappraise? If you are so inclined to enter your answers into the chat, then Jen will give us the answers in just a moment. To add to Christie's comment, it said Todd says that it was also to align with IAAO. Thanks, Todd.
Thank you, Todd.
We are getting yeses coming in.
All right, so the answer is yes. Christy, do you have anything to chat about that question?
I do not.
All right, let's take the next one. Does a CLA of 86 mean that your town is assessing over or under fair market value? I'll give you a few seconds to answer in the chat. All right, how are the answers looking, Jen?
Everyone's saying under.
All right, the answer's under. Any comments there, Christy?
Yeah, so just in short, mathematically, basically what that would mean is if you were at 86%, we would be equalizing you by adding 14% to your grand list to equalize it to 100%.
All right. Does a CLA of 110 mean that your town is assessing over or under fair market value?
Getting a lot of overs.
All right, the answer is over. Anything on that one, Christy?
So again, just using simple math, if we were to equalize that, we would be subtracting 10% from your grand list to equalize it down to 100%.
All right. Does your education tax rate increase or decrease if your town is assessing at 92% of fair market value without considering any school spending adjustments? These answers are a little slower coming in. Oh, there they go.
There we go. Yeah. And getting all increases coming in.
And the answer is increase. You want to chat about that one, Christy?
Yeah, so again, basically we would be adding 8% to your rate to equalize it to 100%. And that would be just the CLA effect. So oftentimes when people talk about tax rates and increases, they blame it all on the CLA, but there are other pieces involved, including a spending adjustment and the school spending and the per pupil count, et cetera, et cetera. So CLA is one effect that increases the rate, and it's important to know that it's only one.
Right. If a town has a COD above 20, will they be required to reappraise? Karen didn't even let me finish the question. She was on the ball. All right. And
yeah.
All right. Looks like the answer is yes. All right. Any notes on that question, Christy?
The only thing I would reiterate on that is the COD is that fairness measure, and everyone talks about the CLA because they understand the CLA more. For me, the COD, because it's more of a fairness equity measure, is more important, and we want to really learn about that and hone in on that so we can talk about that too.
Very good point. Is a sales ratio study the same thing as equalization?
Some no's, but I do have a yes in there,
All right.
but mostly no's.
And the answer is no. Christy, let's talk about that one a little bit.
So as we mentioned, a sales ratio study is part of our equalization process. A sales ratio study is something that you could perform at your town level where you're comparing simply listed value to sales price. You could do that for neighborhoods, you could do that for categories, you could do that for a year of sales, 6 months of sales. You could break it apart in different pieces to study different portions of your market, which is a great thing to do, by the way. What we do is a sales ratio study as part of equalization, because by statute, we're required to equalize the entire grand list. So that means we need to consider utilities, and we have to have an equalization rate for those. We have to consider current use, which is involved in the grand list, so we have to equalize that. And we have to consider the cable property, which is also part of your grand list, education grand list. So because by statute, we're required to equalize the entire thing, our number for CLA is not going to be the same as what you would come up with for a straight town ratio if you just did pure sales. So it's not exactly the same thing, even though a sales ratio study is part of equalization.
All right. Last but not least, Does a CLA under 90 mean that your town will be required to reappraise?
Lots of no's coming in.
All right, and the answer is no. Any notes there, Christy?
So the trigger is 85. So if it was under 85, you would get a reappraisal order, and then the number above is 115.
So what's different this year? Since the beginning of COVID-19, the real estate market has shifted and Vermont has become a very desirable place to be. That combined with a lot of property for sale or a low inventory, or not a lot of property, thank you, has created a dramatic increase in the demand and therefore the price that people are willing to pay. Consequently, the town values are lower on average than the selling prices, which means their CLAs are going down and in some towns very dramatically.
So what you're looking at is a table that was developed by Jake Feldman, who's a statistician at PVR, and it just kind of shows you the trend of what's happened with CLA over the years because of the change in market. And we're going back to 2017, and we have all the way to present. And you can see that in the bracket of CLAs less than 85, back as far as 2017, there were only 2 of them, and currently there are 24. So moving on from 85 to 100%, back in 2017, there were 99, and we've now moved to 203. And on the opposite side of the spectrum, above 100%, from 100 to 115, in 2017, we had 150 towns at that level, and currently we have 33. And then lastly, towns above 115%, back in 2017, we had 10 of them, and currently we have 0. So just a reminder again, according to statute, CLA below 85 or above 115 trigger a reappraisal order according to Title 32, 40, 41A. So as far as the equalization study, what are the takeaways for this year? As anticipated, the study was impacted by the significant changes in the real estate market, as you just saw. Due to the increase in fair market values, many CLAs have decreased. This may cause education tax rates to increase, although currently what is unknown is how much the legislature will decide to apply the surplus that they have. My understanding is they're going to offset some of that at least, so the effect won't be as bad on towns. That's my understanding. I'm not going to make certain promises because I'm not on the legislature, but that is the information that I'm getting thus far. That was the recommendation. So hopefully we won't see as much effect as we thought on the tax rates themselves because we have a larger equalized education grand list because of the CLA changes. As a result of the study, 22 new towns will be ordered to reappraise due to the level of CLA or COD. This determination is based using the last 3 years of valid sales data when compared to the listed values at time of sale.
All right, a few more takeaways that we have. Towns are given the opportunity to appeal their study and must do so within 35 days of the mailing dates of those letters. Obviously, that date has passed for this year. Many of the towns that were being ordered to reappraise have not conducted a reappraisal in 10 or more years. And due to limited reappraisal contractors in Vermont, PVR will be working with towns under reappraisal order to get a contract as soon as possible. All right, I'm not seeing any questions. Jen, did I miss any?
No, I don't see any either, Deanna.
So we're going to take another short break, 5-minute break. And before you do, you need to find the right one. It's done.
Karen just asked a question in the chat. I actually have that. I can dig that up while we're on break.
Yep. And incidentally, I was just going to point out that I did look back, and in 2003, I believe it was. No, I'm sorry, 2013, which would have been just outside of the 9/11 crisis. We had approximately 30 reappraisal orders. So it's not unheard of to have that many. It's not, you know, outside the realm when you have a market change.
So we'll be back at 11 o'clock. Great questions today so far. You may want to go to the email and print your 22 sales validation V2. And the same as the last one, I put in the 1 slide per page and the 2 slides per page, your preference. And I know I spelled validation wrong, and I can't fix it now. And there's also the sales verification form that's fillable that Cy will be talking about. So see you at 11. Anything else I gotta do? Oh, I know what he's gonna do. Something for my feet. My tootsies. Okay, we're gonna start the next session. And it is Cy Bailey, he's PVR Senior Appraiser, and Deanna Robitaille. This will be a review on how to verify, validate, research, confirm, and code sales according to their validity. And it's this one. Go. Okay, Cy, are you ready?
I think I am. Yep.
Or I should say, and Deanna.
Always ready. All right, so let's get started with some things to know regarding your sales review. The first three that we'd like you to know are: use the sales entry system to track sales in your town. Know your sales in order to determine whether they are valid or invalid for PVR equalization study. And also that we may require evidence from you to document the reason that you are kicking out a sale as invalid. You want to talk about those 3 points, Cy?
I would. It really is best practices to keep track of the sales, independent of the sales ratio study. Most of your CAMA software systems, if not all of them, provide you with a method of keeping track of your sales and doing analysis. Sometimes it's very complex and it's a bit easier if you download the information from our sales study to an Excel spreadsheet or some other program that's similar to that. Pat showed us earlier today how easy it is to download the VTPI summary report that gives us all the sales data. I hope you watch that. If you don't understand how to do that, all you have to do is go to the equalization study, the sales validation portion, and over in the right-hand corner is a pull-down menu, and in that menu it's resales and sales summary. Click on sales summary. It asks you to click on, say that it's going to go to an Excel spreadsheet, and there it is. Right in front of you. There's a lot of information on that spreadsheet that you really don't need to use. Delete what you don't need and put in what you do, like the square footage, the age of the house, the number of bedrooms, the neighborhood it's in, lot size, all that stuff. It's really very easy to do, and we really recommend that you do that. Regarding knowing your sales, I just want to emphasize that if you get a bad sale in there, something that really is not valid, and it could potentially, particularly in the small towns, influence your CLA and your COD. So it's very, very important that you really know whether these are valid or invalid sales. We do our best to help you, and we do review them, but you're the guys that should know the market. Regarding providing evidence and documentation, excuse me, Pat again showed us how easy it is to attach a document in the VTPI program. So it's much like attaching an email. It's very easy to do. You just go to the attachments tab. So if you want to send me or any of the other DAs, maybe a sales verification letter that indicates something important that supports your invalidating a sale, you can just attach that there. We're not recommending that you attach something with every sale, but anytime there could be a question, if you attach something that'll help us out, it could be, like I said, the sales verification letter, could be an MLS listing that indicates sales concession or personal property, something like that. Back to you, Dee.
All right, thanks. On to the next slide. So let's talk about market research. Several real estate websites can be provided or can be found to provide information on your market area. Some of the free sites include Estately, Picket Fence Preview, Trulia, Zillow, and the one that the district advisors use most often is NARIN. Auction sites such as auction.com are also very helpful. You want to talk about those for a few minutes, Si?
Oh, I do. We highly recommend that you subscribe to NARIN. And all you have to do is go to NEREN.com. And if you click on their homepage, there are going to be telephone numbers over on the right-hand side. Give them a call. They'll tell you how much it is to subscribe, what information you are going to get. We highly recommend it. You can look at everything that's listed in your town. You can look at all the closed sales. And the closed sales are particularly helpful because they're going to give us personal property. They're going to give us the sales concessions and a complete description of the property that's going to be very helpful to all of you. So please go on their website, give them a call, try to describe, try to talk your select board into giving you enough money to subscribe. Back to you, Dee.
All right. Another thing that we'd like you to know is that we expect you to do the research when necessary. So I was just talking about that a little bit. The reason that we do expect that is that by law, your town gets paid $1 per grand list parcel to assist us with the equalization study. And that language can be found in Statute 32 VSA 5405.
And I just want to remind folks, when you're reviewing the sales, you're looking at a PTTR. Let's say you're looking at a PTTR and you're not in the VTPI section. That PTTR is just a receipt. I want you all to understand that. It's just a receipt for taxes. You really need to read the deeds. That's probably one of the first things that you need to do. And we are giving you, now in the town of Brattleboro, over 4,000 parcels. We give them over $4,000 a year. In the town of Athens, that only has a couple hundred parcels, we're just giving them a couple $100, but they only have 12 sales. So it's certainly covering the costs at a reasonable price per hour. So we'd like you to spend as much time as you could possibly spend on researching the sales. Back to you, Dee.
Okay. All right. On the following slide, we're going to show you a version of a sales verification letter. So I'll go through each of those points with you. And then the listed value that gets verified in VTPI should be as of the date of sale or in your last as-billed grand list. So for example, all sales from April 1st of 2021 through March 31st, 2022 should correspond to the listed value in your 2021 grand list.
And I just want to note that the VTPI section, the VTPI program is taking that listed value, directly out of your grand list. I know a lot of you have had trouble with the grand list amount not matching what was on your grand list. Hopefully this is going to cure that problem. Back to you, Dee.
All right.
Oh, and
So
here we have the letter, yeah.
Yeah, so if you want to take this one away.
So we have a sample letter here, and I'm just going to hit the high points rather than go through every one. You know, we talked about, Christy and Deanna talked about family sales earlier. I'll wait for that to come to, there we go. You know, it was a like kind exchange. That's very good information for you to have. Did they pay did they pay off part of the mortgage? Did they pay some of the taxes, things of that sort? Was it rented? And on our letter near the bottom, we asked the question, are there any sales concessions? And Karen had asked about sales concessions earlier, or Deb Kingsbury did. Sales concessions that can be deducted from the sale price are seller paid sales concessions. And these are typically paid to offset closing costs. So somebody has a sale price of $250,000, you know, gets towards the end and the buyer is getting a little low on money, and they look to the seller and say, look, you know, this is a great deal, but if you could help us out with paying $5,000 of the closing costs, that would be great. And that's typically what happens. It needs to be seller paid concessions though. And it's often misinterpreted when on our form, when the sellers look at this question, they often think that we mean that when they reduce their price, you know. So I'll get a letter back and the guy says, I had a concession of $30,000. I'm thinking, whoa, that was a lot of money. And what happened was that it was listed at $280,000 and he reduced the price after a month or so down to $250,000. But you can modify these. You want to send these letters to both the buyers and the sellers. Modify them to include any questions you think are relevant for your town. You may have a lot of condos. You may want to put questions in there about assessments and things like that. Personal property, we always want to have a question there about personal property. And that's about it for me, Dee, if you want to take over.
All right, I think that pretty much covers that form. So a few more things to note before we go into the actual exclusion codes. When you fill out the verification of sales in BT Pi, please word your comments appropriately and have them correspond with the reason for removing the sale. Those comments are really helpful, particularly if you're taking information from a sales verification form and maybe you haven't submitted it or commented that you just had that sales verification form back. Grievance values, we do not accept grievance values or changes there as a reason to kick out a sale for the study. So I am sure we'll have some comments on that one in a moment. And the mobile home parks, all sales to or from a mobile home park are removed under item number 19 or other. Comments there, Cy?
Well, as you said, we don't accept the grievance values. It's the assessment as of the date of sale. That's very important. That's a hard and fast rule with us. Also, as Deanna mentioned, when you do attach things, we really need a list of the attachments and tell us why you're giving us those attachments. Just sending us an MLS sheet probably isn't good enough. Tell us why you sent it. I want you to see that it was improved last year, Cy, or I want you to know that there were sales concessions, things of that sort. Back to you, Dee.
All right. And then we have those relocation company sales where businesses hire relocation companies to buy and sell real estate when employees relocate to eliminate these sales, or we eliminate these sales from the study. Anything to add on there?
Yeah, just typically these are deals that are made. A relocation company is hired by a large corporation. Large corporations transferred someone away. They need to sell their house. They typically have 2 or 3 folks come in and do appraisals of the property. And that's what they're going to give to the person. And then it's the job, give to the person that's been transferred. And then it's the job of the relocation company to divest the folks of, of this house. And if it sells for anything less, there's sometime participation from the transferee's company. That's about all I have on that one, Dee.
All right. Okay, so just check to see if we have any questions before we get into the actual exclusion codes. All right, it looks like Carol has a question. Why are sales to or from mobile home park owners removed from sales? Do you want to answer that, Si?
Yeah, that's a good question. Typically, what happens is that we have folks coming into a mobile home park. They're renting a spot. They're buying a brand new mobile home. They're paying retail price for this. There's no competition in there at all. Sometimes the owners will discount the price just to motivate somebody to come in. There are all sorts of things that these mobile home park owners do when they sell these properties, concessions that they make or monies that they ask for. And we find that it's best just to leave these out of the sales study. Anything you want to add to that, Dee?
No, that pretty much covers it. There was another question earlier from Chris Evans about what could be an argument be for a town to dispute a reappraisal order. I think that's better for the end of the class or for a phone call with the DA, unless you have a quick answer for us.
I don't have a quick answer for you.
All right. All right, so let's move on to the reasons. So below we have a list of reasons for sales to be considered invalid. 1 through 7 typically are eliminated by PVR prior to export to the town. All older sales are found in the My VTEX or the PTTR search tab, with the exception of 4. So they usually catch all of the 4s, which are timeshares, but sometimes they'll make their way through to your view. These sales transfer a set period of time to use a property versus fee simple ownership. Anything on timeshares, Si?
Well, not on timeshares, but if you want to look at the older sales, like you said, you have to go to the history tab in VTAX because we don't have all 3 years in VTPI yet. So if you want to look at those last 2 years, you need to go into VTAX, select your town, put in the date ranges that you're looking for, and you can get all those sales. Yeah, the timeshares, God, the timeshares are awful, aren't they? They're, fractional ownerships, and they're very difficult for the assessors in the ski towns. That's
Absolutely.
all I have on that.
All right. So let's talk about code number 8 for family. So especially for buyers and sellers with different last names, please don't just say family. State the relationship, father to son, first cousin, stepmother or stepson marriage, etc. Wording example might be family buyer is niece of the sellers. Comments there?
Nope, none. You can move right along.
All right. Exclusion code 9 is for corporation and stockholders. This one's pretty self-explanatory. Most states have a Secretary of State or equivalent website on which you can look up corporation names and ownership information. The Vermont Secretary of State website is located at this link, and you should have this document in your email. A wording example would be buyer is a principal of the seller business per Vermont Secretary of State website. All right, and number 10. This is a fun one. Auction, foreclosure, bank property, liquidation, tax sales, sheriff sales, bankruptcy, receivership, dissolution, or liquidation sales. So documentation might include a printed auction notice or deed pages mentioning the foreclosure, delinquent tax history prior to sale, PTTR wording, marketing MLS wording that indicates liquidation, or a town sales verification letter stating a liquidation. Also included is short sales. For bankers or brokers are typically good sources of information for short sales. And a wording example in VT-Pi might be liquidation. Seller was under financial duress and could not afford to keep the property. Delinquent tax report for the past 2 years is available or included.
And this is another time where the being able to attach attach a document is going to come in very handy. So attach a document in this case and give us a short comment, and that'll suffice.
Awesome. I think we have a few more wording options here for a 10.
Yeah.
All right, so we have auction sale. A wording suggestion would be copy of auction notice available for viewing or attached. And then bank foreclosure per deed or CPTTR wording. Exclusion code number 11, we have for estate sales. So these are sales by or to guardians, trustees, or executors and administrators. They should often, but not always, be labeled as invalid. If you're unsure, send out sales verification letters and or request that we send them as well. Do you want to chat about that for a second, Si?
I do. You know, estate sales are very difficult for all of us to determine what's an arm's length transaction and what's not. You know, if you go to an advertisement, whether it's on the internet or in Naren, and you see that they've cleaned out the furniture out of the house, you know that they're trying to dispose of this pretty quickly. It's very common to have, you know, a couple siblings. They're spread throughout the country, particularly in Vermont. You don't want to be holding on a house being empty in the wintertime. You know, there are all the problems of somebody's got to monitor the house. There could be frozen pipes. You've got to pay the taxes for that part of the year. You know, these people are highly motivated to get rid of the property, and that's why we would exclude an estate sale. But that's not always the case. You know, there are the cases where the folks leave the furniture in the house. They tend to it very well. They take care of the landscaping, take care of any small problems during the marketing time, and they can get market value for the property. So it requires you to do a little homework, see what had happened, ask a couple of questions, send out the letters, have us send out the letters if you don't get a response. And that's about it, B.
All right, let's move on to 12. So government sales, these are sales to or from the U.S. government, state of Vermont, or any political subdivision of Vermont. They will not be included in your study. That one's pretty straightforward. 13, we have charity, religious, benevolent. So this can include churches, religious organizations, and not-for-profit organizations. To check on Vermont's organization's business structure to determine profit status, you can go to that same Secretary of State's website, to the business inquiry. And a wording example might be buyer is a domestic nonprofit per Vermont Secretary of State website. Any additional points?
Yeah.
All right, 14 is for unusual financing. Sales where financing significantly affected sale price. Cash financing or owner financing may not necessarily invalidate the sale. A wording example might be 100% seller financing at 20% for 45 years per town sales verification letter from seller.
Now, you know, this is another case where there's an exception to the rule. You know, there are times where there's owner financing and it really is market value. It didn't affect the market value at all. Particularly with the vacant lots, you know, people buying large lumber lots are expecting the sellers of these properties to provide some sort of financing to participate somehow. You'll often find when you're buying lumber lots up in the Northeast Kingdom that the guy selling them will be willing to finance the property, and it's selling at market value. And other times you're going to find where somebody's buying a house and they didn't qualify for a loan or had some problem where the owner's going to where the owner is going to provide some financing, and sometimes the owner is charging more than market for the interest and for a short period of time, and these people will probably pay just about anything to be able to get in a house. It's usually first-time home buyers, and it does affect the value. It does affect the purchase price of the property. They're not really arm's length transactions, and you want to disqualify those. That's all I have there, Dee.
Oh, that summed it up well. So 15, we have as partial interest. So first and foremost, this is not the same thing as a subdivision. Partial interest relates to ownership and legal rights. For example, a 10-acre lot sold, but prior to the sale, that seller transferred a legal right of way through the middle of the property for their daughter to access land she was purchasing next door. Thoughts on partial interest, Si?
Right, I think we have a couple more examples on the next page there, Dee.
All right, we'll read those first and then we'll expound. Okay, example number 2, a couple sells their 20-acre lot and house, and at the same time transfers future development rights of the land to a conservation agency. Or a property owner sells his 50-acre woodlot with new legal restrictions on it. He's no longer only allowing one building to be constructed in the next 80 years, and giving himself the right to build a pond on the property, including the use of the pond surrounding 2 acres for the seller's lifetime.
So I'll give you an actual example. I think it was up in Lunenburg, Vermont. I was looking at the sales ratio study, and there was a sale of a property that just didn't seem right to me. You know, I knew the town a little, and I knew this property, and it just wasn't quite right. And I called the town clerk and I said, you familiar with this deal? And she said, oh yeah, I know that one. I said, well, what happened? And she said, oh, well, the guy sold it. I think he moved away to Texas or something like that, but he retained a portion of the land that he could put a mobile home on. Well, this wasn't mentioned in anywhere, MLS or anywhere. But again, he was selling a partial interest in this property. He was keeping, you know, they were going to let him keep it there for maybe 10 or 15 years or something like that. I don't know the exact circumstances, but there's a real good example of a real life example of what happens with partial interest and how it could be removed from the sales study. We find a lot in the ski towns around us where multiple families, 3 or 4 families get together, they buy a ski house. You know, after a while, one of the families loses interest, kids grow up, whatever the case may be, and they sell their interest back to the other folks. So you have on your assessment $400,000 for a ski house, and you have a sale of $100,000. Well, that's usually what happens. That's about all I have there, Dee.
Okay. 16, also pretty straightforward. It's property assessed in more than one town. So a wording example might be the sale includes 50 acres in the neighboring town.
Oh, we just want to emphasize that you go to your surrounding towns and make sure you have all this information right. You know, check with the towns where the lots go over the town line, and bring it to the attention of your mappers if the mappers haven't already done that for you. That's it there, Dee.
Definitely a good suggestion. 17, excessive personal property. That requires documentation, such as an amount stated on the PTTR. Comments on that one side?
Yeah, I want to bring your attention to the IAAO standards for verification and sales adjustment, because they tell us that you can make an adjustment for personal property. And we're talking about personal property, you know, they're buying the tractor, the boat, furnishings, things of that sort. Or if it's a commercial property, we're talking about FF&E, you know, furnitures, fixtures, and equipment. So they say up to 10%, you can make an adjustment. Anything over 10% of the sale price. If the value of the personal property is over 10% of the sale price, you should invalidate it. It's just too much speculation at that point. So you want to invalidate those where they're over 10%. If it's under 10%, and we have a lot of those, you want to include an inventory. So you're gonna need to call the broker or look at MLS. You know, sometimes they list what's being sold in MLS. But we want you to attach something that gives us an idea of why you're making that adjustment and what the value of that personal property is. And again, with commercial property, if the personal property is over 25%, then invalidate the sale. Up to 25%, give us an idea of what they're buying for that, what they're buying, and that's it.
Great, thanks, Si.
Yeah.
18s are for subdivisions. We're all familiar with those. So sale of property conveying only a portion of the assessed unit will be excluded because the total listed value will not match the portion that's sold. For example, purchase was 3 acres out of 15 acres listed. Did you want to talk on subdivisions for a moment before we move on?
Well, I just wanted to remind folks that subdivisions are not partial interest. We get a lot of those every year. It's just important that you understand that, and important to include the comment that Dee mentioned that, you know, if it's 3 out of 15, that's very helpful to us. We sometimes, and I don't know if I should bring this up or not, you know, it just confuses folks, but I'm going to do it anyway, that if you're in a very, very small town and you have very, very few sales, sometimes we will ask you for the values and the new values and the old values of those subdivisions, and we will use the subdivided parcel as part of the sales study. It's very rare that we do that, but we will occasionally ask you for that information. And that's all I have there, Dee.
All right. So exclusion code 19 is kind of our catch-all, called the other. This category should be used for atypical situations or where none of the other categories are appropriate. We do require a written explanation for these sales, and on the following slides we have some examples. So one example would be someone had to relocate quickly. Cases where the seller had to sell quickly to move to a nursing home. They couldn't take care of the property, couldn't afford the property. They all need supporting documentation. So some wording examples might be the town sales verification letter from the seller's son states she could no longer keep the property up and sold at a loss in order to move to a nursing home. Or the seller was in her 90s and could no longer live alone or afford the taxes. She was on the delinquent tax report for 2 years. And on the next slide, close friends. We talked about family earlier. Obviously, close friends don't fit that parameter. It's another type of sale where you should put this as excluded under 19, giving details regarding how you know of the situation and how it influenced the sale. Boundary adjustments, sales involving a deferral of property, property swap or exchanges. Again, please provide the pertinent details. And then any other reason that you might find for a sale to be invalid. Do you want to talk about others at all, Si?
I'll give a couple for 1 or 2 for instances. Like, you know, there's the person that moves back to town that wants to buy grandma's house. And grandma's house is really only worth, you have it on the grand list at $200,000. You just on a reappraisal. That's what it's worth. And she pays $300,000 for it because she had to have grandma's house. And the person selling it knew that. That's another, you know, give us a brief explanation, attach whatever you want, put something in the comments. That'll be very that'll be very helpful for us. There are hundreds and hundreds of things that end up in other. I couldn't begin to expound on them. All we ask is that you give us a good explanation of why you're excluding the sale. 9 times out of 10, we go along with what you give us, but just, you know, tell us exactly what's going on so we can take a quick look at that note and move on. Back to you, Dee.
All right. And we have a new code for you this year for abutter sales. So in prior years, we had asked you to put abutter sales in 19, but again, that's a catch-all, and abutters are a pretty common instance. So category or option number 20 this year is abutter sales, and a wording suggestion would be the buyer already owned parcel X. Copies of maps are helpful. If you could attach those, take pictures, etc. Any comments on abutter sales, Si?
Well, to show you just what a nerd I really am, I'm pretty excited about the, axiomatic or VT-Pies option where we can just click on the map while we're verifying the sale. We can look to see who's the abutter. We can even use a little snipping tool and cut that out and paste it on a document and send it along if we want to. We need you to give us the span number of the abutting property. That's going to help us. But I'm telling you, having that the option of getting the map and telling right away is going to save us all a lot of time. And that's pretty much all I have, Dee.
All right. And I think that might be, oh no, how could we forget number 21?
Oh,
All right,
God.
so we have large change post-assessment. This is for when someone has made improvements or taken down a building or a building is burned, for example, between April 1st preceding the sale and the actual sale date. So some wording examples that we would have for you are purchase price included 1,000 square foot addition added before the sale but after April 1st. The new listed value is X. Property at time of sale was listed at 70% complete, but it sold at 100% complete. New listed value is X. Please note that these sales will only be considered invalid if their overall value is changed significantly for the next grand list year.
Yeah, I just want to emphasize that this is specifically for things that have changed after you've done your grand list. So in the period between grand lists, if they've added a barn, they've put on an addition, they've added bathrooms, done all sorts of gutted the house, totally remodeled it, well, that's acceptable. Just provide us evidence. Usually in the MLS listing, it's going to say house within the last year has been totally remodeled, they've added such and such. That's great. Give me that information and, all of us DAs will be happy. The problem is that some folks want to do their grand list maintenance. They want to go look at the sale. Oh, it's $400,000. I've only got it in for $300,000. What am I going to do? Well, you look at it and you say, well, maybe I should have graded it higher. Maybe the condition was wrong. Geez, maybe I'll change, this and that, and that'll bring the value up a bit. And you want to be able to change that in the sales ratio, so you can't do that. That's grand list maintenance. That's not what we're looking for. We're looking for what it was at the time of sale. If it wasn't exactly like it was, that they made those significant changes after you did your grand list, that's when you can use a 21. I hope I've made myself clear there. Do you want to add anything, Deanna?
Yeah, so some points that I make with the large change post-assessment, a lot of people look at this as being the last time the property was visited. So if you are 5 to 10 years out of reappraisal, we're not talking about when you last went and put eyes on that property. We're talking about April 1st of every year being your date of assessment. So realistically, these changes should have been captured on April 1st if they were in existence. If you have a sale that happened on June 1st, but between April 1st and June 1st, they built a garage or put on an addition, then that is the type of thing that you would exclude under large change post-assessment because it wasn't in existence. You didn't have the opportunity to assess it. And this is also where I would, again, encourage you to go out to the MLS, to those sites to see what's on the market, because it's very evident pretty quickly when you have parcels in your town that are for sale and they are saying, fully renovated bathroom, fully renovated kitchen. That gives you the opportunity to take those things into consideration before April 1st so that you are actually comparing apples to apples when the sales happen. That's all I have. And then 22, it's in the sale removal code or exclusion codes, but it's not necessarily a reason to remove the sale. It's for information purposes. And we want to make sure that the first sale is the one that's marked as a resale in the study. Sometimes it happens that you have a resale within the same year and you have access to both of those sales. If it's a sale, the first sale happened, 2 years ago, you can certainly put that in the comment section and your district advisor will label that as a resale for you. A wording example would be that Blanche to Cross sold in March of 2019. That one would be coded as a 22. And then again, Cross to Smith in May of 2020. That second one would not be coded as a 22. Any thoughts on resales, Si? Si, are you muted?
I was rambling on for a while there. Uh, it's a good idea to keep track of these. D was very comprehensive, but the one thing that I want to add is that this is when we talked about analyzing the sales in keeping track of our sales at the beginning of our little workshop here. If you look at these resales, these are going to help you. They're going to give you a very good idea of what the appreciation rate is in your town. How much properties are increasing over time. Highly recommend that you do that. Keep track of these. Let us know when they're resales. We'll put them, we keep track of them also. That's about all I have to say.
All right. And that is the end of our presentation. It looks like Terry has been keeping up with the questions in the chat. Are there any?
It looks like there's a couple. Let's see here.
Okay.
Terry responded about the abutter. So new kitchen and additional baths are common ones before market sales, so maybe good post assessment change question or consideration. And another question is, what about
the what is the question exactly, Jen?
Just that's not a, I guess it's more of a comment that there tends to be new kitchens and additional baths that are common ones before market sales.
Oh, without a doubt, that is, those are the most common, bathroom, kitchens, and decks. Those are the most common ones.
And then I see a question about what about a resale in the same year? So 4/1 through 3/31.
So if there is a resale in the same year, it's very easy for you. You can mark it a number 22, right? A number 22, and just please do it on the first sale, not the second sale.
And then that looks like that's it. Terry answered most of the other questions. It looks like all of the other questions.
You can actually read some of them out loud if you'd like, because we do have some time. And I would like to just answer a question that was from the last session. It was about asking how many towns were going to be required to reappraise that had reappraised in the last 4 years. So Jen, you and I looked that up at the break, and it looks like there were 4 because of COD and 1 because of CLA that had reappraised in the last 4 years. Having said that, out of that, at least 2, possibly 3, their last reappraisal was a statistical only, not a complete reappraisal. So I think that changes the definition here. So I just want to make that caveat.
Okay, so a follow-up to the resale question is the example was 14 months apart and in different GL years. The time period to mark the resale or a resale in the last 3 years.
So again, we're going to want resales that have occurred within the last 3 years. And if it's outside of the first year, so it's a sale that you don't have access to, just tell us in the notes, and we will access the older sales and mark those.
Okay, and then so back to the mobile home question was that their mobile home had permanent owners in reference to why the mobile home parks are removed from sales, the owners removed. And Terry's response was, if a mobile home sold from the owner in the park to another owner outside of the park, then that would be a valid sale. It's only when the mobile home park owner buys or sells a mobile home and it stays in the park that would probably not be valid because there's an influence on the sale. Another question was, what if an abutter pays fair market value for a property? And Terry says it is still invalid because it has influence of owning the parcel beside it.
So that one comes up pretty often, particularly in my territory. I'm sure it happens in other district advisors. But in the interest of being equitable across the state, we have to treat them all the same. So if it's an abutter sale, we have to eliminate them from the study.
Okay. So question from Carol is, how do you do a good reappraisal with COVID in place?
Want me to take it, guys?
Sure. I think Christy also has some good comments on this.
Sure. Times have changed, obviously, because of COVID, but times have changed anyway. Prior to COVID, we were seeing declining rates of entry when folks were doing reappraisals, particularly because of folks' work habits. But if you talk to any of the reappraisal contractors, you're going to see that they've all developed techniques and schemes to gather as much accurate information as they can. I know in Dummerston, where NIMRIC did a reappraisal, they carried around something that was very similar to a baby monitor with a camera, handed it to the folks. They walked around the inside of the house, gave the data collector a tour, came out, and that was it. There's no saved record. There's no recording of the video that they took. They can also do that with you can also do that if you have phone service in the area that you're working. You can do that with a smartphone. A lot of people, Burlington did a reappraisal within the last couple of years, and also South Burlington. They utilized mailers to put to folks, calls to condominium associations, any place that they could get good information. It's a different world out there, and we really have to try our best to get information. I was told by one of the data collectors, he said during COVID, he thought he got better information than he did prior to COVID. And the reason was he'd knock on the door, somebody would come to the door, and obviously they're not going to go looking through the house, but they'd stand and talk to them forever. They would explain what had happened to the house. They'd tell them about the easement that goes through the back of their lot that affects the value. They'd tell them about the septic system that was failing. And these were things that they didn't always find out when they just came to the door. Can I take a look at the inside of your house? Anything you want to tell me? Well, it never came up. But when they were just out on the porch having, 6 feet apart from each other, having a conversation, they felt like they were getting better information, and people were more willing to answer the door and come out and stand on the porch than they were in the past, just letting people into the house. No, I'd rather you didn't come in and look at the house, was the answer. Well, now they'd say, okay, well, let's talk about it out here. And that was surprising to me. I didn't expect that. But we have to develop different strategies. Anything you want to add to that, Christy?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. You've got to use the resources that are available to you. And, you know, during the equalization study, we've had a lot of folks say, well, we couldn't get in. I think that we've really got to start thinking outside the box and use some of these resources. And that can't be the answer, because we need to, you know, manage that equity and make sure that we're being fair to everyone. So we need to get the data, and we need to find a way to get it. And I think that you pointed out some great resources for that.
And Todd also says online images and sales ads, and that you could measure parcels in Google, are two suggestions he provides. And then one last follow up on the mobile home.
Well, let me add one thing, Jen.
Yeah, go for it. Sorry.
Go into the mobile homes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if Todd used it, but I know that John Vickery in Burlington used what's called Eagle View. And this is a process called pictometry, where they do flyovers, and they do it at an angle, and they're able to measure the houses or commercial buildings. Obviously, doing flyovers is practical in some areas, and in wooded areas, it's probably not so practical. But Eagle View is used by a lot of folks across the country. Another thing to think of. They don't have to go to the house. They can get all their information from the office. I wouldn't recommend doing that, but you can do that.
And Todd follows up with Show My Street on Google will also show side views in higher density areas. So back to the mobile homes, was the mobile home sales she's referring to are between individual owners and do not include park owners.
Well, then there'd be valid sales.
Simple as that. That is the last I'm seeing. Todd has also provided a link for the, I guess Show My Street is a separate website you can use. So he's provided the website to that in the chat if somebody was interested.
Okay, perfect. We're going to take a 10-minute break and come right back and start the next session. Close this one. Move this over. In your email, you have your equalization study workshop, February 2022, version 4, and there's the calculator for the calculations for figuring out COD that we're going to go through at the end. So see you back at noon.
And I want to just quickly reiterate, folks, if you haven't done so yet, if you don't have your name and town on your meetings ID, just please add that in the chat so we can get you all down for attendance. Name and town. Thank you.
Oh, fuck it up. All right, Elaine, I'll send it to you. We just heard you. You're not muted.
What'd that person say?
We heard you. I'm trying to find your mute button. Oops. Okay, we're going to get started. Close this. Open this. Slideshow from the beginning. All right, so this session is the last of these sessions and is an overview of how to read your equalization results, how to find the numbers, and each number what each number means to you. So this is going to be with Christy and myself. And here we go. Oh, Christy, you start.
Okay, so we're going to talk about the equalization study and the results, the certified final computation sheet, and the math that goes with that all. We suggested that maybe you might want to print your own sales information and have it in front of you. I would encourage you, you may have trouble keeping up with the math through if you're trying to do it yourself. I would say just listen and then go back to your own and try to do the math with what we've shown you, because you'll have the examples right there. Having said that, I'm going to try to go a little slower today. We were a little rushed yesterday. I'm going to try to go a little slower today, and I'll try to do each math situation twice in case you're trying to take notes. It is all in the written document. All of the examples and all the math are in the written document. So if you print them, you'll be able to go back to that. So again, here's your certified final computation sheet. We talked about this a little bit earlier. This is the summary of all the math that goes into the equalization study. And we're going to go through most of it. I think by the end of the day, you should be able to take yours and tell anyone and explain to anybody where the ratios come from, how the CLA is calculated, possibly how the COD is calculated if you choose to stay for that part, and how each equalized education value is calculated through. So as I mentioned earlier, the first thing you're going to see is the categories, the 15 categories that are in your grand list that will look familiar to you with the property count for each. These are coming right from your 411 when we do your equalization. Education form 411 listed value. And then the ratio that's applied for each category, which we're going to show you how to find which ratio was applied. And then applying the ratio mathematically, we're going to show you how some of them are pretty straightforward and some of them aren't, and how to know how to do those that aren't. So you have a little more confidence and don't think we're just doing some sort of math voodoo. It does actually all calculate through when you learn how to do it. And then in the bottom section of the page, we have the CLA, and we're going to talk about how that's calculated. And lastly, the COD. So what is equalization? Equalization is the process of comparing sales prices to listed values in a given town for a 3-year period. These sales and ratios are aggregated to show the level your town is assessing at relative to 100% of fair market value, known as the common level or CLA, common level of appraisal or CLA. The level of assessment is then applied to your town assessed values represented on your 411 form to equalize your values to 100%.
For example, if your town was determined to be assessing property at 80% of fair market value, the equalization process would add 20% to your 411 values to equalize your town to 100%. Conversely, if your town was determined to be assessing properties at 105% of fair market value, the equalization process would reduce your 411 values by 5% to equalize your town to 100%. These equalized values are then used to determine education rates and school funding so that all towns share equally in that funding.
Why do we do equalization? The equalization process is a statutory obligation of the tax department. The Commissioner of Taxes is required to determine the equalized education property tax grand list and coefficient of dispersion, COD, for each municipality in the state, according to Title 32 VSA 5405. The COD helps to ensure that the property valuations within a municipality are equitable.
What is the impact of the equalization or CLA? The result of equalization study are used to do the following: determine education property tax rates, determine whether a municipality must undergo a reappraisal, determine taxes municipalities pay to the county. The CLA is applied to current use values to equalize and make equitable. The CLA is applied to appeals beyond lister grievance to make fair market value equitable. The CLA is applied to utility values each year to make fair market value equitable. And the CLA is applied directly to education tax rates to equalize the rates.
What is the CLA? The CLA is the common level of appraisal and is one of the primary functions and outputs of the equalization study. The CLA represents the level property valuation and review has determined your town to be assessing at relative to 100%. It is referred to as the common level of appraisal because in addition to the sales ratios from 3 years, there is a utility ratio applied to equalize utilities and a current use adjustment. Any sales study performed by the town would yield a level of appraisal, LOA, not a CLA, because it would be lacking these adjustments. So when you look at the final comp, and Terry and I are actually going to go through this math with you, so don't worry about committing it to memory or anything. When you're looking at the final computation sheet, the common level of appraisal is the education property value, listed value, plus cable property if you have any, divided by the equalized education property value.
Towns are towns are required by statute to maintain a common level of appraisal that does not exceed 115% and does not go below 85%. If these limits are not met, the Division of Property Valuation and Review will order the town to complete a reappraisal according to Title 32, 5405.
What is the COD? The COD is the coefficient of dispersion and is a measure of equity. It shows how fairly distributed the property tax is within the town. A high COD above 20 means that many taxpayers are paying more than their fair share and many are paying less than their fair share. If a town's COD is higher than 20, a town is required to reappraise. The COD is the average of the absolute deviations of each sale ratio from the median ratio divided by the median ratio.
Towns are required by statute to maintain a coefficient of dispersion, or COD, that does not exceed 20%. If this limit is not met, the Division of Property Valuation and Review will order the town to complete a reappraisal under Title 32, Section 5405.
What is the lister or assessor's role and responsibility when it comes to this process? The listers or assessors are asked to provide feedback to PVR each year about the validity of sales, and Cy and Deanna spoke about this earlier. It is essential to spend sufficient time researching sales that come into your office to determine if they represent valid arm's length transactions. The importance of this cannot be understated. If you're not given enough time to do this, you might want to have a conversation with the select board about the impact of these numbers. Terry, are you there?
I was reading away. The results of the sales study hinge primarily on the quality of the data that is used. It is also important for you to study sales for your own purposes, to have knowledge and insight into your level of assessment so you can speak about it to taxpayers and town officials, in addition to making decisions and planning adjustments to your grand list. A complete reappraisal is only one option. These are where you can find your equalization study. If you go to the Department of Taxes website, which is tax.vermont.gov, and you click on municipal officials, then this pops up right at the top. And you can either click on the 2021 equalization sales study or see equalization study results green button. And it'll bring you right to your town information. You would have to enter your town name on all three, because each one is separate, and then it will open it up in a PDF and you can save it to your computer.
So what you're seeing here is the letter, which should look familiar to you. These were mailed in December of this year, and it basically gives you the results of the equalization study. And we send it in a letter format to all of the interested parties in town. There are about 5. I believe it's the select board, the listers, the town clerk, the school board, and there's one other, right? Supervisory union, is that right, Terry?
Yes, you are.
Okay. So there are 5 entities we send a copy of this to, which is the equalization study results. And you can see the information here, your education grand list form 411. So again, that would have been the last 411 you submitted to us prior to December. That we would be using there. The equalized education grand list, in other words, once we converted it to 100% by applying your CLA, the common level of appraisal that we certified for your town, and the COD that we certified for your town. And then we also provide the links for the page that Terry just showed you so that you can go and actually get the whole entire sales report, all the sales that were used in your town. And you can get a copy of this letter there as well, and you can get that final computation sheet. So if you haven't done so yet, you probably want to go and print all of that information so you have it. And then lastly, towns have 35 days to appeal from the date of that letter, 35 days to appeal to property valuation the results. So that would be if you think that we included a sale or did not include a sale that you thought was valid or was invalid. And we could have a conversation about that, and it would be an appeals process. The last day for appeal this year was January 27th. In a typical year, we have between 10 and 15 appeals, and this year we have 16. So we're pretty close to average for this year. And we're working on processing those as we speak.
So highlighted text in, go back. Again. Highlighted texts are not on your printed equalization study. I just want you to understand that. So, there we go. I'm going to go through the calculation for the R1s. In the R1 category, we're going to figure out what that equalized education value should be. You would take your education form 411 listed value. There is no current use. We're not going to worry about that. Christy's going to go through that. We're going to apply the ratio. We're going to take that 284,743,500 divided by the ratio of 0.9554, and it will yield a value of 298,035,901. That's how you do the R1s.
So that's the pretty straightforward math that most folks don't have any trouble with when there's no current use involved. It gets a little more difficult when there is current use involved, and I'm going to show you how that math works because it involves one more additional step. So the first thing you need to know is that current use is a year in arrears. So because of that, we're taking the current use values out of the equation. We're equalizing them at the prior year CLA, and then we're adding them back in. Okay, so it's another little step that you just have to understand, and then you can do the math. And when you see the column that says C use value, what that's representing is not the current use exemption, which you might think, your exempt reduction. It's actually representing the use values that were charged in your town. So in other words, that dollar per acre that they paid on. So we're going to be equalizing that to put it back into your grand list. So for this particular town, the farm category has current use in it. So we're going to start with the education form 411 listed value, which in this case is 4,225,600. And we're going to subtract the C use current use value of 317,100. Again, we're taking it out of the equation to start with, and we're left with 3,908,500. Okay, so now that we've taken that 317,100 out, we need to equalize that piece. So we're going to go, in order to do that, we're going to look at the back of the final computation sheet. Maybe you've seen this little section before and not really known what it was for. Maybe you haven't. But in order to do that, we're going to go to the back of that sheet or the second page, depending on how you print it. and we're going to show the farm, we're going to look at the farm category, and we're going to see that the CLA applied for current use in the top section there on the back page is 0.9975. So we're going to be equalizing that use value at 0.9975. So we're going to take that 317,100 and we're going to equalize it by dividing by 0.9975, which will equal 317,895. Okay, and now we're going to go back to the front and we're going to take the number without current use, that 3,908,500, and we're going to equalize that at the ratio that was applied, 0.9664, to give us 4,044,392. And then we're going to add what we equalized the current use value to, which was 317,895, and that will give us 4,362,286 for an equalized education value in that column. So you might be saying to yourself, oh my gosh, that's a lot of math. It actually is just two pieces. And once you know where to find the pieces and put them together with this example, I think you'll be able to do it on in your town. I'm going to take a second. If anybody wants me to go back through that, I will.
Okay, having none.
Okay, there is a question. There is a question here.
Okay.
Where is the 0.9975 show? Terry, can you kind of circle where it shows here? And for you, where you will find it is on the back side of the final computation sheet, if you print back to back, or the second page, if you print individual pages. It's this little box that's contained on that side of the paper. Okay, and it's in the upper right-hand corner. It should represent the prior year CLA, which is what we're equalizing current use to, because current use is a year in arrears.
Is there another question?
I think it's unrelated, so I'll take it at the end.
Okay. So now let's figure out how we come up with the CLA, and that's what I'm going to go through. So on your certified final computation sheet, we're going to use your education form 411 listed value total. In this case, it's 635, 357, 201. We're going to add the cable, which is 1,880,730, which it comes up to an education 411 listed value. And then we're going to divide it by your education equalized value. And that's going to yield your CLA. When you do the math, it's going to look like a decimal. And what you want to do is times it by 100 to move it into a percentage. So you'll see in my example, it comes out as 1.00019 or 100.02 because it's rounding up. Make sense? And it's spelled out for you so you can figure it out right along with your study. Okay, so individual ratios, how do we come up with that? For individual ratios, it's easy. We're just taking your listed value divided by the sale price to equal the sales ratio. So pretty easy.
Terry, let's give a second in case anybody who needs us to go back through that CLA calculation or individual ratio. There was a comment about not being able to read the screen, apparently when they're printing, Terry, on the,
Yes, I'll have to come up with something to fix that.
maybe on the final computation sheet they're referring to. Maybe we'll send it, and maybe I had a different way that it was sent to me. But when I printed mine, I'm able to read it. Now, granted, I have to wear reading glasses, but I have to wear that all the time anyway. So
I think if you save it as no, it is in PDF, so it should have. So do you know what page you're referring to? I think that would help. And then
Sally Cook, are you referring to the final computation sheet? She says something about all these figures at the bottom of the page are obliterated by the bar across the screen. If printed out, they were practically microscopic. Can't read.
Did you print? We'll talk to you after.
We'll work on it. Yep. Thank you. Okay, here we go. Next one. So now what we're going to talk about is how to find the ratio that's applied for every category on that final computation sheet. I want you to be able to find those ratios so you're not frustrated and again thinking that we're doing some sort of voodoo. We're going to show you how to find what ratio is applied. So let's start with the R1 category in this example. And the first place you need to go to is the end of the sales in the certified sales report. And at the end of that category sales, you're going to see category statistics. And the first thing we're going to look at is in the middle of the page. And this right in the middle of the page where it talks about category statistics, we're referring to what's called a confidence interval. And we're required statistically to be 90% confident. In other words, we're 90% confident that 9 out of 10 of the next sales will fall within the range that we are anticipating. So if we are confident, this answer right in the middle of the page will be a yes. Okay, where it says category sample valid, 90% confident. If that's a yes, that means we are statistically confident in the results. That also means if it's a yes, we're going to apply the aggregate ratio that you see on that page. So in this example, the R1, because I have a yes at the end of the category, the aggregate ratio is 95/54. And that is what I should anticipate to see on the working computation sheet for R1. So if we look back on that, we see the applied ratio is in fact 95/54. Okay. Now we're going to do another one. So we're taking and you could go through each one. Once you learn how to find it, you could go through each one on your working comp or your final comp and say what ratio was applied and how did they get there? I'm going to figure out how they got each ratio. So we're skipping in this example to the miscellaneous category. And what's important to note here is you might say to yourself, well, I got quite a few sales. I think they're probably going to be statistically confident in this category, but we don't know that until we go to the end of the category and see if we have a confidence interval. So we're going to go to the end of the category, end of the sales for miscellaneous. We're going to look at that category statistics, and we're going to look in the middle of the page where it says category sample valid. And the answer is no. So I'm not statistically confident that this category can stand by itself. So we're not going to use the aggregate ratio that you see here. So what we need to go is to go to the next larger grouping, which if you think about it like a hierarchy, we're adding more sales to get more confident. So in order to do that, we're going to go to the end of the entire sales report where we have the next category, which is called class. Didn't work at the individual category level, so we're going to go to the class. The class for miscellaneous is known as farm, wood, and miscellaneous. So those three categories are grouped together in this class. So we're going to say to ourselves, do I have a confidence interval? Am I confident at the class level? And we see here that the answer is no. So because I'm still not confident, I'm not going to use that aggregate ratio either. So now we need to go to the next highest level, which would be the town. And we're going to see, do we have a yes at the town level? And if we in fact do, then that will be the aggregate ratio that will be used for miscellaneous. And in this case, we do. So 96/64 should be the ratio that we should see for miscellaneous on the final computation sheet. So we're going to go there and look at miscellaneous, and in fact, it's 96/64. So in short, what you have to do is just keep going until you get a yes on that confidence, and that's the ratio that's going to be used. Okay, now we're going to go show you another one. We're going to go to the other category. Oh, is this you, Terry? Or me?
No.
No, still me. Okay. We're going to go to the other category. And again, you say to yourself, well, looks like I've got quite a few sales. Maybe I'll be statistically confident, but we don't know that until we look at the back of the category in the sales report. And I look under category statistics in the middle of the page. And in fact, I have a yes, category sample is valid. So then I look at that aggregate ratio, which in this case is 112.95. And that should be the ratio I should see on the final computation sheet for my other category, 112.95. Let's give a minute on that, Terry. Any questions, Jen?
Not in relation to what you're discussing.
Okay, then we'll hold them to the end.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, so the next thing we're going to talk about is how to know whether or not a sale was included in the study. And we have two statistical measurements that call sales into questions just by statistics alone. And those are called outliers and extremes. And if you've ever looked at your sales ratio report and the sales report specifically, and you looked far over to the right, you may have seen these little dashes. And you may have said, I don't know what that means. Looks like voodoo. Maybe they had a printing problem. I don't know what's going on with those dashes. So those dashes are there for a reason. And if you look to the top of the columns there, you'll see that hierarchy that I was talking about, although albeit it's in the opposite direction. So it's category, class, and town. And the reason those are there is because a property could be considered an outlier for the category, the class, or the town, or all three, or 2 out of 3. Also, a property could be considered an extreme for the category, the class, or the town, or any of the 3, based on statistics. So when you see in those little, where those little dash marks are, when you see an E, you know it's an extreme for that particular designation. If you see an O, you know it's an outlier for that particular designation. And if you see all three, as in this example that's highlighted, you know that this sale is an extreme for all three of those levels. So an outlier is called into question. A sales verification form is automatically sent on our end. And if we get no further information, we're going to include it in the study. Okay, still have an O labeled on it, but it's included in the study. An extreme is labeled with an E, and it's removed from the study. Now, what you have to be careful of is an extreme would be removed from all calculations in the study if it were 3 E's. If it were only 1 or 2 E's, that sale might be included in some of your ratios, but not all of your ratios, depending on which hierarchy it was not included in, because it was an extreme for that. Okay, and we're going to talk about how you calculate that. Okay, so if you look again, we're looking at the end of the category, and we're trying to figure out what makes an outlier or an extreme just for the R1s. And you're going to see this at the end of every single category, and then you're going to see it at the end of every class, and you're going to see it at the end of the town, because the numbers are going to be different. So therefore, an outlier and extreme is going to be different for each level. Okay, so we're going to look right in the middle of the page, and it says limits established by original sales data. So here's what we're looking at for outliers and extremes. We're going to look at what's called the interquartile values. So if you think about making an array of all of the ratios that you had in the R1, and then dividing it into 4 quartiles or quarters, okay? We're going to be looking at the 25th quartile and the 75th quartile to set our range of value for what we think is reasonable. So in that red box that Terry has in front of us, the 25th percentile or 25th interquartile value is 88.82. The 75th is 104.80. Okay, we're going to use those two numbers to calculate what's called an interquartile range. So if you were to take 104.8 and subtract 88.82, you would get 15.99, which is your interquartile range. Okay, so the next piece we need to know is that outliers are 1.5 times the interquartile range, and extremes are 3 times the interquartile range. So we're going to start with that 15.99, and in order to calculate an outlier, we're going to multiply it by 1.5, which equals 23.98. We are then going to subtract that 23.98 from the low interquartile value, the 88.82 minus our 23.98 equals 64.84. This establishes our low limit for outliers. So anything in R1 under 64.84 will be labeled with an O, or an outlier. Okay. Then we want to set the upper limit for outliers. So we're going to take that high interquartile value, 104.8, and we're going to add the 23.98. That equals 128.78. And this will be our upper outlier limit, our high outlier limit. And anything above this, until we get to extremes, will be labeled with an O in the R1 category. And now we're going to move on to extremes. And we said an extreme is 3 times the interquartile value or range. So we took the 15.99, we multiplied it by 3, and it equals 47.97. We're going to take that number to set our lower limit for extremes, and we're going to subtract it from the low interquartile value. So 88.82 minus 47.97 equals 40.86. This will be the low extreme limit. Anything below that ratio in the R1s will be labeled with an E. And then we want to set the upper limit for extreme. So we're going to go to that high interquartile value, 104.8. We're going to add our 47.97. And we get 152.76, which will be our extreme upper limit or our extreme high limit. And you can see in the box right in the middle of the page, albeit the bottom box is not going to be on your page, but that middle box always will be. So we're giving you those numbers. We're just trying to explain to you here how to get there if you wanted to mathematically get there. So here's an example of where you can see some properties that are labeled with 2 E's, one for a class, one for town, 2 O's. It's an outlier for the class and the town, but not the category. An extreme for the class and the town, but not the category. So you can see where at those different hierarchy levels using different numbers, some properties will be an outlier, some will be an extreme, and some will be each of those at different levels.
Christy, do you want to field a question about outliers and extremes?
Sure.
Have the crazy sales we've all seen affected what outliers and extremes are?
I'm sure that they have, because it's going to affect the range of your value. But that's why these statistical things are really good, because they take out those real statistical outliers and extremes. So anything really crazy statistically that you can't explain, we're using measures to eliminate. You know, as much as we all don't like statistics, it's good to have some of these things built in.
And that's why it's important for you to check your sales and validate your sales properly.
Yep.
Because it could be something wrong and it's going to change that statistical outliers and extremes.
Yep. Every time you're validating sales and we're removing sales, it's changing the parameters for this. So let's say that you did absolutely no sales validation. You said, I don't care, I'm just going to let PVR do it. And PVR said, you know what? It's really not our job to validate sales. We're going to let it ride the way it is. We're not doing the research for them. You would have real extremes in there. You would have all your family sales, you would have all your estate sales, all those things we talked about. And that would change the parameters, which ultimately would change your results. Oh, good. Okay. Can we go back to the last page on other before we do this? I think it was this one. Sorry. Sorry. Where it talks about the town level. Can you go to the end of the town? And we'll do this next. I just want to show you one more thing, and then we're going to do COD for those that are still with me.
I'm not sure what you're talking about yet.
I will find the page, Terry. I'm sorry. Where it talks about the town level. Can we go back to town? Keep going back a little bit more. I apologize. Right there, thank you. So I just wanted to point out one thing we didn't talk about here, although we've alluded to it throughout the day. You see here at the end of the sales study, we have the town and we have an aggregate ratio. So you might be inclined to think, well, that must be my CLA because that's my town ratio. And I will admit to you that many, many years ago, I thought that was true and I didn't understand why until I did the math and until I understood the process. This ratio that you see represents the sales ratio for all of your sales in your town. So it's a good sales ratio number, but remember we talked about sales ratio studies not being the same as CLA. So even though this is your pure sales result, your town ratio, it's not the same as your CLA because when we equalize and we calculate a CLA, we do a utility adjustment, we do a current use adjustment, and we add in the cable. So that's what makes it different. Those numbers are never going to be the same, nor should they, because they're for different purposes by statute. Just wanted to point that out. And then lastly, what we're going to go through is how to calculate a COD. And for those of you that are already math boggled, I'm sorry, I'm going to give you one more just in case you want it. Okay. So the coefficient of dispersion, we're going to calculate so that you know how to do it. We're going to calculate the COD or coefficient of dispersion for the other category in this case. Okay. So the way that you do that is you're going to array your ratios. You can put them in a spreadsheet in any order you want, or just copy them out of a spreadsheet. All of the ratios that were in that category, if you want to just do a COD on a category. Okay, so we put all the ratios in this spreadsheet. And then what we're going to do in Excel, you can easily do this in Excel, is we're going to calculate the median ratio. So, and we're going to give you this spreadsheet so that you can see it as an example with the calculations. In Excel, you just simply type in a field equals median, and then you highlight all of those ratios that you want to calculate a median on, and it will tell you which one is the median. In this case, it's 105.45. The next step, I'm trying to talk slowly because I know I talk too fast sometimes. The next step is, in order to calculate the COD, we need to know the absolute deviation from the median. So even though that sounds like a lot of fancy words, what it means is we need the difference from the median of each of those ratios, regardless of plus or minus sign. That's what absolute means. So you can actually also type that right in a calculation in Excel, and we'll give you all that so that you can do it. Basically, you're saying what's the absolute difference from each of these ratios to the median, which is column D in this example. And then we're going to add up all of those differences or deviations. So we're going to do in Excel, we're going to do equals sum, and we'll highlight all of those differences or deviations for a total deviation. In this case, 196.09. And then we need an average deviation. So in order to calculate the average of everything, we need to divide by the number we have. So again, in Excel, you can simply type in equals count. You can highlight how many samples you have and it will tell you the count. Or you can count them by hand and type it in if you want. That's up to you. Okay, so we're going to take total deviation divided by the count equals average deviation. In this, and again, you can just type that in a cell, equals total deviation divided by count for average deviation. In this case, 21.78777, etc. Now we have average deviation, and we're going to divide that by the median number again, because we're looking for the difference around the median. That's what we're looking for. that bell curve we talked about very early on today. So we get 0.2066. We're going to multiply that by 100%, and that will equate to our COD of 20.66. And if we look back on our final computation sheet, or at the end of our sales, I'm sorry, our COD for the other category is in fact 20.66. And if you're boggled by this or scared by it, let me just tell you that I am not a natural math whiz, and it takes me actually sitting and doing it. And once I sit and do it, then I understand the product better and I can explain it to people. And I think you'll feel a lot better about what you're explaining and what you're doing if you force yourself to go through some of this math.
And the spreadsheet that we sent you in the email has this calculation in it on sheet 1, on sheet 2. I think it says COD with calculation, and the other one says COD, and it'll spell it out for you, exactly what you need to put in.
And then these last couple of pages are just a written definition of what COD is. I talked you through the math. I didn't go through it, and it depends on how your brain works better. Does it work better with example or by actually reading the definition? So we talked about confidence interval and that 90%, and this talks about it, explaining it in definition terms. And then also the aggregate ratio we talked about, which is the total listed value divided by the total sales price. That's what we use, is the aggregate ratio. So this is just kind of giving you a definition of that.
A question has come up. Can you explain the PRD?
I do not have the math for that in front of me. I'll have to make that a next goal. So no, I can't do that one off the top of my head. Outliers and extremes, we talked about that, and again, this is just a definition written. And the 25th and 75th percentile interquartile values, again, just written out for you if you want it.
Another question has come up is, what is your advice or suggestion for any lister or assessor having to review their study each year on what to concentrate on, especially when there are a lot of sales to review?
I'm assuming you're talking about verifying sales and how to verify sales, as opposed to looking at the study after the fact. I guess maybe I'm not clear. Oh, the computation. I think it's important that you understand how the math works. Obviously, the math is all computerized, so it's going to work, but I think it's important for you to go through these analysis so that you can really explain it to somebody. I think that you're going to feel a lot better about the results, and if you can explain where all those pieces come from. Just looking at, obviously, looking and making sure that we got it right in your mind so that if you have to appeal is good, but it's also good to really understand that math. And I'm hoping I answered the question. If I were you, would I go through every single sale and do the ratio? Probably not. I'd probably have a spreadsheet where I'm looking at them constantly.
The follow-up is, but we would want to make sure the sale in the computation should be there, right?
Yes. In other words, what you think should be there is included in the computation. Yes. So if you were running your own spreadsheet, you should be able to run a lot of these numbers ahead of time and know what you're going to come up with. Now, assuming that you took out the same extremes and outliers that we did, you would get the same answer at the end of the category. Anything else, Jen?
I am not seeing anything come through.
You're going to let me off that easy?
I was just going to say, everybody pre-did their math today.
So there was one outstanding question from Chris Evans, I believe, about reasons to appeal a reappraisal order. We didn't have time to talk about it before. We have a couple minutes. Is that something that you would like to answer now, or have her reach out to her district advisor?
I think I can answer it relatively quickly. I mean, an order, unless you can absolutely prove that something was really, really wrong in what was used, whether we used the wrong town, we used the wrong calculation or something, an order is typically an order. Now, the next, you obviously have a right to appeal, but I'm just putting out there how you might actually be successful. And those would be the only reasons I can think of in my mind is if we really erred, right? So then the next question becomes, now I have an order, what are my options? And I think what you need to think about is there's a lot of things outside of, depending on your numbers, depending on how long it's been, there's a lot of things outside of a complete reappraisal. And I think that's what we need to start thinking about more, whether it be a statistical reappraisal, because we're only a couple years out and our COD is still good. Can we do a statistical and buy ourselves some time? A partial reappraisal if we can identify where the problem is, if it's a certain category or a certain neighborhood or something like that. So there's a couple of different pieces in there, and we can always talk with you about it if you're running up against that. And there was something else I was going to say and I completely forgot. Oh, I know what I was going to say. If you're trying to run these numbers in your town, you're looking at your final computation sheet and you're saying, Christy is talking crazy. I can't get to any of these numbers. Call your district advisor, have them try it. If they can't try it, then call me. If they can't get there or whatever, or you both can call me and we'll go through the math. I think it's a great exercise to do.